million people can be slaughtered in the heart of Africa. 7,000 to 11,000 Congolese just for the cities right now under Rwandan occupation. Killed. We are okay with that because the priority for us is the regional integration framework. We can be incoherent in this peace deal. We can be incoherent to allow those who are profiting from the war, those who are actually doing the killing, to use this as a loophole. Like Rwanda can wait 8 months, 6 years, a year, 10 years, whatever time it will take to neutralize the FDLR, because it recycled the FDLR, send them back into Congo as part of armed groups, and also because the DRC is not being allowed to have the mean to neutralize forces. Why? Because one, they are asked to integrate those who never had the intention to be loyal to the government, never had the intention to be loyal to the Congo. And then two, maybe the most obvious reason, because they just don't right now have control of those territories that presumably the FDLR right now reside. They are right now on the Rwandan occupation. So from the get-go, the Congolese government is literally set to fail. What's up? Welcome back, y'all. Another episode of Congo Unfiltered. So I'm glad to be here. Happy Friday for everyone. Today we're gonna, like we always do, got through the propaganda and trying to challenge that sanitized headlines, and also obviously center the voices and the truth buried, the voices of the Congolese people. So today's episode is one that I've been looking for a long time, in terms of like actually sit down and have honest conversation with somebody who's not familiar to the show, who's not familiar to Friends of the Congo. We are joined by Ann Garrison, and I know she won't be uncomfortable with some of the questions and also the way the conversation would go. She has written extensively on the Congo, on Rwanda, on U.S. foreign policy, and even on the Horn of Africa. So she's really aware of what's going on in Africa in general. So while millions of people have died in the Congo, and thousands in the past, I'll say decades, right? Thousands of people for just recent month, and millions of people for 3 decades now. The international press as either did a good job ignoring the crisis, or told it through, I would say, the lens of those who are complicit in it. So in Rwanda's book, Kagame is essentially celebrated as a visionary leader, somebody who stopped the genocide in Rwanda, and therefore cannot be touched. And even as UN report ties his government to massacre, resource theft, and illegal occupation. So Anne has not only challenged that narrative, but she also exposed our corporate media, geopolitical interest, and Western government continue to distort the truth. So from Kagame's impunity to the myth of the FDLR, from the Washington Accord to the role of the U.S. mining companies, we are going to unpack it, all of it, today. So Anne, welcome to Congo Unfiltered. I'm glad to have you back. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. How have you been?
I'm fine. Just fine.
Yeah.
busy, fine. And I will write that piece. We talked about a piece about the peace agreement for the gray zone. I'm still working on that, but it will get done.
Yes.
And as I told you just a few minutes ago before we started, I think the main problem with the peace agreement is that it identifies Rwanda's M23 militia, which has been fighting under foreign command, Rwanda's command, in Congo since 2012, actually in various earlier iterations with different acronyms, different names, but it emerged as M23 in 2012, was defeated and then returned, and I think it was 2021, started fighting it. They've been fighting under foreign command, and this peace agreement, which Claude Gauthier rightly called a minerals agreement because it's really about securing minerals for U.S. corporations, it identifies M23 as a legitimate Congolese entity, not as a foreign militia, not as a militia fighting under Rwandan command, but as a legitimate Congolese entity that the Congolese government is obliged to negotiate with, as they have been in Doha. The agreement that first came out, the biggest problem with the agreement that we learned about, between Rwanda and Congo a month or so ago, was that it described Rwanda's presence in Congo as defensive, when it's been aggressive. It's been some of the worst, most devastating, catastrophic aggression in the world for the past 30 years, leaving millions of people dead. And now we get this agreement that says that that their presence there has been defensive, and the agreement says that M23 is not a militia fighting under foreign command, as it is under Rwandan command. It says it's a legitimate entity. The DRC has to negotiate with it in Doha. Now, maybe you can tell us. I haven't had time to review that agreement that came out of Doha. Maybe you can do that.
Yes, and we are going to dive into that. But I was thinking of more like kind of like slowly dive into that by starting first with the narrative, right? The narrative that is out there before we even get I guess the question that people will have to even ask themselves, the audience and people who are going to watch this later, people who are just interested about the Congo in general. So it's ask themselves, how did the Congo get to the points that we are right now? So it's about really that, framing that narrative. And I know that, Ann, you have been, and I mentioned that in the intro, really challenging that really dominant Western narrative, I would say, about the Congo. So why, one, do you think that the media, the mainstream media or the international media continues to either ignore or misrepresent the crisis in the Congo? Why do you think that?
Well, I think in part because Rwanda's narrative has so overwhelmed all narratives about the region since 1994. Ed Herman and David Peterson wrote a book called The Politics of Genocide, in which they pointed out that genocide is a very political word. There are worthy victims and unworthy victims. And Rwandan Tutsis were identified early on as the most worthy victims and have been most honored as victims since 1994, more than anyone but Jews exterminated during the Holocaust. And there has been a concerted effort to equate what happened in Rwanda with what happened in the Holocaust. In 1995, representatives of the National Holocaust Museum and the Simon Wiesenthal Center arrived in Kigali to help construct the narrative. And it's a very simple narrative in which demon Hutus killed angelic, innocent Tutsis in 100 days, 800,000 to 1 million, a number very arbitrarily arrived at and actually implausible, as a number of researchers have demonstrated, because there weren't that many Tutsis in Rwanda at the time. There was somewhere between 300 and 500,000 Tutsis. This is based on census data, and some hundreds of thousands survived. So it's just not plausible that 800,000 to 1 million died. But that's been the story that's out there. It's the story that's in the Wikipedia. At first, the number put out there was 1 million, even though there had been nowhere near enough time to do a scientific study of who had died. Rwanda completely controlled the process of counting the dead and reporting on it. So that narrative and that number, 800,000 to 1 million, became like engraved in stone, meaning it's in the Wikipedia. It's even ultimately it was adopted by the UN General Assembly. Rwanda pushed and pushed and pushed to have the Rwandan genocide renamed the genocide against the Tutsi. And this is now broadly accepted, and they got the UN General Assembly to adopt it. Israel gave them a lot of support in this. At first, there was resistance from the US and Europe. Israel pushed it. And Israel has had this very close relationship with Rwanda from the beginning, and both receive benefits from it. Israel gets to say that Holocaust happened. Look at what happened in Rwanda. It's like what happened to the Jews in Europe. And so we must be ever vigilant. Now, what a fraud that is for Israel to be saying that is really obvious now. Okay, what Rwanda gets out of it is to be able to say that what happened in Rwanda is equivalent to what happened to the Jews in Europe. And to develop this whole culture of fear, to make people afraid of differing with the story. It's like, if you're a Rwandan genocide denier, then you're equivalent to a Holocaust denier, somewhere in some depths, in equivalent to being a sex offender. And, there's this whole apparatus of fear that was in one most recently manifested, in one instance, most recently manifested was in the conviction of Charles Onana, the author of a number of books about the Rwandan genocide and the Holocaust in Congo, including Secrets of the Rwandan Genocide, Holocaust in Congo, the International Community's Omerta, meaning silence, conspiracy of silence, and Anna's book about Operation Turquoise, which was the French operation to protect Rwandans who were fleeing Paul Kagame's army, fleeing into the DRC. Well, it was then Zaire. And he was convicted for what he wrote in the book about Operation Turquoise. And I'm not sure exactly what the crime was. It was either genocide in ideology or minimizing the genocide. I think it might have been minimizing the genocide. And apparently they've gotten some law passed in France that makes that a crime that they were able to convict him on. Actually, I think, I'd have to go and review what I myself wrote about this, but I think there was a way in which they used Holocaust denial legislation to convict Onana. And Judy Weaver, whom you're going to have on the show, she wrote.
I'm really excited about that.
Yeah,
yes.
So am I. She wrote one of the most important books about this, In Praise of Blood, Crimes of the Rwandan Patriotic Front, in which she concluded that even more Hutus had died by RPF violence, by the violence of Rwandan President, then General Paul Kagame's army. And this is, of course, a really radical conclusion, goes against everything we've been told, everything that's been enshrined in the Wikipedia, and now in the UN General Assembly. And it's become the cut and paste whenever, legacy media outlets, they want to write something about the genocide. It's like it's in the template. It's either in the template that they slap into it, or they go to the Wikipedia and copy a paragraph and slap into it. So it's partly this whole this whole operation of controlling the narrative, as I said from the beginning, in collaboration with Israel, and then creating this culture of fear about challenging it in any way that it's called genocide denial. And in Rwanda, you go to prison for it. And I particularly wanted to I should go back first and say, because there are going to be people who are going to be shocked. How dare you say that? There's probably somebody listening who's going to say, how dare you? She should be in prison. She should be in prison with Onana. She should be in prison with Onana and Victoire Ingabire. Okay, and I particularly wanted to come on to talk about Victoire Ingabire, a Rwandan opposition leader who was arrested, who spent 8 years in prison from 2010 to 2018. in part for differing with the official story, which is legally codified in Rwanda. She had the courage in the face of this carefully constructed narrative, which had led to genocide, Rwandan genocide denial being the equivalent of Holocaust denial. She had the courage to go back and question it. And I spoke to her in 2010, and one of the first things that she said to me as I was trying to understand this was, people think that Hutus are killers. Hutus, they are killers. What they don't understand is that before, during, and after the genocide, Hutu people were killed, in many cases in crimes against humanity. She didn't say genocide. That would have been a flagrant violation of the law in Rwanda. But what she said was enough to land her in prison for 8 years. The other thing she did was challenge Paul Kagame and expose his pretense to two things: an electoral democracy. I mean, she exposed that his pretense to electoral democracy was a fraud, and that reconciliation, the reconciliation that he claims in Rwanda, is a fraud. I looked into this further, and in ensuing years, I found a WikiLeaks document that said that Tutsis are completely in control of the government. The idea that it is a reconciled mixed ethnicity government is a fraud. Every Hutu who is in a position, a high position of power, an official, is paired with a Tutsi who has the real power. So she exposed the regime's lies, and she also challenged this narrative, the genocide narrative, and it's the genocide narrative that has been used ever since to justify Rwanda's war in Congo. They always begin their story, when they talk about it, when they try to justify it, they always begin with 1 million Tutsis slaughtered in Rwanda. We have to keep it from happening again, never again. And therefore, we have a right to be in Congo for 30 years, causing the death of millions of people and smuggling who knows how many millions or billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Is that?
And it's interesting that you started by talking about the Rwandan genocide and also the narrative behind that. I think is very, very important. That because what you said, if I remember, and I was actually something like came in my head, that the BBC actually had a documentary that was published in 2014 regarding specifically not just the genocide that happened, but also the narrative, obviously controlled by President Kagame's in power, and how he literally wanted to erase the Hutu that were part of that genocide, the Hutu that were also killed during that. And that's why also I talked about it last week during this show, going through the history of the UN. The UN said moderate Hutu because that's now what the consensus about. Like, yes, we are going to include them. But it was very interesting that in 2014, that when the BBC actually did a story about that, and I'm gonna put this on the screen, that created like a diplomatic incident between the UK and Rwanda. The Rwandan Prime Minister at the time had to condemn the BBC, strip them away from the right to report in the country. It was a whole incident. So I think I just wanted to point that, and how I guess when the International Rescue Committee came up with that study about the death toll in the Congo in 2007, 5.4 million people, like, folks, particularly those who were backed by Rwanda, jumped and started to revise these numbers. I mean, to me, dead is dead, right? Like, 1 million, 2 million, 500,000, 100, or even one life killed, that's too many, right? So to me, it's very interesting how the Rwandan government is so attached to that narrative of only talking about Tutsi being killed
Yeah.
and trying to erase the other people, just trying to othering the tribes that was also massacred. That's why when they were celebrating, commemorating the genocide in Rwanda, you had actually U.S. officials not saying Tutsis genocide, saying Rwandan genocide.
Yeah.
I saw folks online from obviously pro Kagame side jump and trying to say, "Oh, how dare you saying Rwandan genocide?" So it's always the same story.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that you are on helping us unpack it. Yeah.
Well, I should say I would never deny that there was a Tutsi genocide. I would absolutely never do that, and neither would Judy Reaver. She researched and demonstrated only that there was also a Hutu genocide, and that hundreds of thousands of Hutu people died at the hands of Paul Kagame's army, the Rwandan Patriotic Front. And then people who know the story, but maybe for those who don't, Kagame, as was revealed in the BBC documentary you're referencing, Rwanda's Untold Story, ordered the assassination of the Hutu Rwandan and Burundian presidents when they were flying home from negotiations in, I think it was Arusha. It was either Arusha or Dar es Salaam.
It was Arusha, yeah.
It was Arusha.
Actually,
okay.
Yeah.
They were shot out of the sky, and after 4 years of war and the creation of a huge Hutu refugee population surrounding Kigali in desperate circumstances, the assassination of the presidents was like throwing a match in a haystack. And also, as soon as the president's plane crashed, immediately the Rwandan Patriotic Front started a military operation to seize power in Kigali. And Colonel Luc Marshall, who was second in command of the peacekeeping operation at the time, and who was a military expert, and also Alan Stam, one of the researchers who has some military experience and expertise, said that this military operation could not have happened spontaneously. It was well planned. The only way this push to seize Kigali could have begun like that fast, was if it was very well planned. So there was a plan to assassinate the president, trigger this kind of violence, which would enable Kagame and his army to seize power in Kigali. And he had to do this because the peace agreement that had been negotiated earlier would not have allowed him to come to power, because it was for one person, one vote elections, which he could not have won in a country that was 85% Hutu and 14% Tutsi and was as ethnically divided as it was. He would not have been able to seize power in that instance. So he seized power militarily, and then he started holding these faux elections in which he awarded himself in 92, 94, 99% of the vote. Last time I think it was 99.8.
Yeah, 99% last year.
99.8, yeah, just last year. So let's see, getting back to Victoire, she exposed that these elections were a fraud. She exposed this pretense to liberal democracy, liberal Western style democracy. And these elections that were being held so the West could say that they had the democracy they had argued for. When they were pushing for the negotiations during the Rwandan War, which went on from 1990 to 1994, they kept pushing for elections. Oh, you have 50, not always only 99.15.
That's ridiculous, right? 99.15.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the election in
That's
Rwanda,
the
by the
most
way.
he's gotten yet. I think before it was, something like 99. So he's been increasing his numbers every time there's an election. But the West had been saying you have to have an electoral democracy. It always does. We have interests in this part of the world, so we're going to insist you have a democracy, and we'll back a proxy that's going to claim that its goal is a democracy, and you have to have multi-party democracy, and so that was decided at Arusha, and then after seizing power, Kagame maintained this pretense of electoral democracy, which allowed the West to pretend that it had gotten what it argued for. But let me see. I want to get not too far away from what my main hope would come out of this podcast was, and that is to understand the importance of Victoire Ingabire and her imprisonment. She was arrested. She was released in. Let me see. Let me go over some points. I wrote 2 pieces about this recently. So one of the best ways for me to just organize what I'm going to say here would be to go over some of this. I have one piece. Victoire Ingabire must not suffer the fate of Kizito Mihigo. Okay. She was arrested again on June 19th. And she was arrested for allegedly encouraging a group which had owned a book on nonviolent protest and allegedly planned to do a nonviolent protest. That's what she's accused of here. And those people who owned the book about nonviolent protest and allegedly planned a nonviolent protest were in pretrial detention for 3 or 4 years. And so it was after they finally came to trial, she was arrested for encouraging them. Now, obviously, this is not a liberal democracy. So she was arrested again. And in 2018, she and gospel singer Kizito Mihigo were released from prison after she had served 8 years. He had served 4. They were ordered not to move beyond the borders of Rwanda, where what they were saying would have found a wider audience. And nearly 2 years later, in 2020, Kizito tried to escape into neighboring Burundi. He tried to cross the Rwandan-Burundian border. And he was apprehended, and 4 days later, we were told that he had committed suicide in jail. Nobody believed that. The autopsy report was never released. Human Rights Watch called for a transparent investigation and independent autopsy. It was just ignored. In 2024, in the documentary How the NBA Got Into Business with an African Dictator, she told an ESPN reporter, "If they put me in prison, I will be imprisoned. If they assassinate me, I will be assassinated. But I have to continue my struggle." She's absolutely fearless. Now, she's arguably in a stronger position than Kizito was because she's been able to write since being released. She's been able to find a voice in Al Jazeera, The Guardian, The Elephant, African Arguments. The Guardian published one of her op-eds, and Al Jazeera gave her more voice than any of the other large outlets. And her rearrest was reported by France 24, NTV Kenya, Reuters, Radio France International, Associated Press, Yahoo News, The Washington Post. So she's arguably in a stronger position than Kizito. But she doesn't have the high profile that ultimately forced Kagame to release Paul Rusesabagina, whose story was dramatized in the movie Hotel Rwanda.
Didn't she appear because I saw videos and I was actually looking for that video. Isn't she appearing to the court like injured? I saw videos of her, and people right now just speculating that she was most likely beaten in jail. Is it something that you can tell us more about the condition that usually oppositions lead in Rwanda are being detained?
Well, I actually haven't heard that. And when she appeared in court, she actually looked pretty good. I think I haven't heard that. I've heard she was tortured before.
Okay.
The first time that she was arrested, she was held in a room, sitting in a chair, without even a mattress for some days. And then she was held in solitary confinement without any light, in a cell with no light for some great period of time. And Rwandan prisons are notorious. They're notorious for overcrowding, unsanitary conditions, and torture. So there's a lot to worry about for her here, and she represents what the whole Rwandan population needs to worry about. Rwanda has one of the top three, it always ranks in one of the top three highest per capita prison populations in the world, 620 per 100,000. And a lot of those people are in prison without ever having come to trial. And a lot of them are in prison for quote unquote genocide ideology or genocide crime that they've never been prosecuted for. Genocide ideology meaning disagreeing with this dominant discourse that that the Rwandan government has made such effort to institutionalize nationally and internationally ever since the genocide. So let me go over some of the other main points here I made in the second piece I wrote about saying that Victoire Ingabire had been denied bail and remanded to prison, meaning moved from jail to prison. She can't expect a fair trial. This is a totalitarian government. She's already been convicted. She was convicted before, and the African Court of People's and Human and People's Rights ruled that she had not had a fair trial. But of course, that court has no enforcement mechanism. So it was purely, a moral victory. But she's been a big threat ever since she returned, because, as I said, she has overthrown, she has invalidated his pretense to liberal democracy and reconciliation, and she's told the truth about Rwanda and DRC. So there's a great danger that she will go back to prison, and once she's in prison, she won't be able to write anymore. She won't be able to write as she has for these major outlets, Al Jazeera, The Guardian, African Arguments, etc. And there won't be a story to report. Once she's in prison, the only story left to report is about anyone trying to get her released. So because she is telling the truth about Kagame's argument for why he has been in Congo for the past 30 years, her release is as important to Congolese as it is to Rwandans.
Absolutely. And I'm not sure if you saw Yolande Makolo, she's a spokesperson of Rwandan government, what she wrote, and I'm showing that right now. And she said, Victoire Ingabire is neither an opposition leader nor a defender of democracy. She is an unrepentant criminal who was convicted for plotting to overthrow the government through violent means and attempting to reignite ethnic division in Rwanda. Thankfully, this is actually probably sarcastic. Thankfully, Rwanda justice has once again upheld the rule of law. That's literally a government official right there. And then Yolande tweeting about Victoire is kind of like one going against this article from The Guardian talking about her arrest, and I think you spoke about it. And you have other folks just commenting, calling her like demons, like again, just like you were saying earlier, right?
Yeah, they think that all they have to do is scream genocide denier. If they scream genocide denier, it's like screaming Holocaust denier. There's no more conversation to be had, and you're consigned to those depths as, you know, equivalent to a sex offender.
Yeah.
So that, you know, that whole structure has been created to close off conversation, and closing off that conversation closes off a questioning of Kagame's rationale for being in DRC, because he can always say the genocide. These are defensive measures. We have to make sure it never happens again. And that's also very convenient for the international community. Like, I pulled up something else I wrote here again in the past in the piece headline U.S. and UN Treasury in the African Great Lakes region. And in her book, what's the name of her book? Post-Genocide Rwandan Refugees, Why They Refuse to Return Home, Myths and Realities. Masako Yonakawa wrote, let me see if I can find it here, about how U.S. corporations collaborated when Kagame first, invaded DRC behind this AFDL, sort of Congolese front. And he was supposedly invading to chase down the genocidaires, and he chased Hutu refugees all the way across the Congo. This is from her book, Washington's support of the AFDL, that's the Rwandan faux Congolese army, was made clearer by Kabila's deals with U.S. companies. It was led by Laurent Kabila. Was made clearer by Kabila's deals with U.S. companies. One was Bechtel, which provided satellite data by drawing up a master development plan and inventory of the country's vast mineral resources, and provided high-tech intelligence for the AFDL at no charge. Bechtel commissioned and paid for U.S. National Aeronautics and Space Administration satellite studies of the DRC and for infrared maps of its mineral potential. Some of these satellite data gave Kabila useful military information before the fall of Mobutu. In exchange, Bechtel, which designed and built projects for mining companies, became first in line to win contracts. This is what was behind what was supposed to be a hunt for genocidaires responsible for the genocide in Rwanda. And one more paragraph here is that another deal was with the American Mineral Fields, AMF, headquartered in Bill Clinton's home state of Arkansas. The AMF, American Mineral Fields, signed a U.S. $1 billion contract with Kabila to explore cobalt and copper deposits in exchange for providing funds for the war.
What year was that? Is that 1997 when they came in the country?
1996.
1996.
When the
first Congo War invasion. Yes.
Yeah. The military contractor Brown and Root, which is a subsidiary of Halliburton, was also very involved. So Kagame's story, this narrative that's been so institutionalized, also provided cover for these U.S. corporations, support for the invasion and what they got in return for supporting Kabila's army. So it was one of many ways in which this institutionalized narrative became very valuable to the West. Another way was in that it became a justification for U.S. wars, like when NATO, the U.S. and NATO demolished Libya and killed Gaddafi. They said they had to do it to prevent another genocide like that in Rwanda. When they decided to start bombing Syria, they said the same thing.
Yeah. And a few months ago, if I can tell this little story also to the audience, people listening, a few months ago, I went to New York for a conference. It was organized by December 12th movement, Salute to Comrades and also Connie for Palestine in New York,
Mhm.
and then I'm forgetting the third, uh, and France Fanon Foundation. So I
Mhm.
went there, and then I think the theme was decolonization is not a metaphor, and I went there as one of the speakers.
Mhm.
And at the end of the events where I gave my take on at least from a Congolese perspective regarding decolonization,
Mhm.
somebody approached me, and that's someone who had followed Friends of the Congo for a long time, and,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
he knew Brother Maurice and some of the folks, Friends of the Congo as well. So
Mhm.
he started talking to me about the Rwanda success story, right? In
Mhm.
terms of like why Rwanda is the country that is working,
Mhm.
and I guess his line of question was really genuine. He was trying to say essentially that what's going on in the Congo cannot be Rwanda's fault, right? Because
Mhm.
Congo is a failed state, and he's right,
Right.
and that Rwanda is also succeeding. And I was trying to challenge him a little bit regarding that narrative.
Mhm.
One is, really, is it true that Rwanda is truly succeeding? Like, what's your measurements for success, right? I'm trying to challenge him on that, because the
Mhm.
folks who are being arrested because of free speech,
Mhm.
the folks who are being imprisoned, killed,
Mhm.
the folks who are unemployed, they're not gonna say in Rwanda right now. They're not gonna say that Rwanda is a success story, because people cannot even freely speak. And so one, it was trying to challenge on that very narrative that is really Rwanda a success story when it comes
Mhm.
to a successful story when it comes to countries in Great Lake region. And then
Mhm.
two, it was also the fact that Rwanda has to work as a country that is backed by the US, as a country like any other US allies, right? As a country that is backed by France, as a country that is backed by imperialists.
Mhm.
Rwanda has to work, because Rwanda, Paul Kagame particularly, has been doing the work for them. Um, we even say that Rwanda is the place of transit where all these illegal minerals are being sent first before getting shipped either in UAE
Mhm.
or in the US or Europe, right?
Yes.
So I'm
Mhm.
like, Rwanda really has to work in terms of that, because you gonna have to justify the money that you're providing to those countries. While you have to justify, one, if you have to think about from like even an American perspective, you have to
Mhm.
justify the aid that you're sending to Rwanda. You have to justify the investment made in that country. So therefore, that country has to work. But you talked about, I guess, accountability or the lack of accountability on it in part of Paul Kagame and the war crimes that he
Mhm.
is consistently being accused of, not just internationally, but also you talked about Victoire Ingabire, not just him, and more Rwandan citizen arrested, right? And in Paul Kagame is blatantly violating international law, yet we
Mhm.
have not seen accountability. And even in the report, in the Spanish court document that
Mhm.
I was showing last week, that also talks about all the war crimes against humanity. So I
Mhm.
guess my question to you is regarding that lack of accountability, right? And you spoke a little bit about that when you mentioned the Clinton Foundation. What role do you think the U.S., the United States particularly, because both of us, we're both in the U.S.,
Mhm.
what roles particularly has the U.S. played both directly and indirectly in fueling or sustaining the
The stream just froze for me.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, the stream just froze for me for a minute there.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
What role has the U.S. played in sustaining Rwanda's?
Yes. What role has the US played both directly and indirectly in fueling or sustaining the crisis in the Congo?
Well, okay, there's a lot to say about that.
Hmm.
Years and years of UN reports uh, document the involvement of US corporations in the plunder. Um, there's one particular report in which it even talks about how Citibank was particularly involved in financing uh, and facilitating the plunder, the plunder of mineral resources. And the United States has consistently, despite knowing what the Rwandan regime is, and there was recently a the last State Department report made it clear that they know exactly what Rwanda is. They know what a horrific human rights abuser it is. They know that the prisons are full and overcrowded. But can I say it's been convenient? As I say, there's this whole ideological infrastructure built on this idea of the Rwandan genocide, that the whole what I call the genocide industrial complex, including the Mass Atrocities Review Board, when Obama came out with his executive order on preventing genocide and mass atrocities, it begins with a statement that it's been X years since the Holocaust and X years since the Rwandan genocide, and this means we must be ever vigilant. This reminds us that we must be ever vigilant, and we're going to create this Mass Atrocities Review Board that will report to us whenever there's an impending genocide that we have to step in to prevent. Okay, this is an excuse for military intervention. It's an excuse for going to war, like in Libya. But it's been completely exposed by the genocide in Gaza. So the continued support for the Kagame story, for the Rwandan genocide narrative that we've been talking about, it has continued to enable Kagame's invasion, occupation, and plunder, which has benefited U.S. corporations. So he and that narrative have been virtually untouchable all this time. So let's see what else.
And just to announce the audience, we are going to very soon. I'm willing to have another guest that folks are going to find interesting. I'm not gonna say his name, but is essentially the Oakland Institute. They published, I would say, an article diving into the Washington Accord and who is essentially benefiting or profiting from that accord. So we're gonna have them on this show to get kind of like dive on that particular aspect. But talking about the Washington Accord that was signed on June 27th between Rwanda and the DRC, obviously brokered by the U.S. What is your perspective about this particular accord? Like, what do you think? What do you think of the Washington Accord? Let's start there.
Well, we talked about that a bit. I think the main things I have to say about that are it's bogus in that it describes Rwanda's presence, a hugely aggressive, catastrophic military presence in DRC for 30 years as defensive. And the defensive description is, as I said, based on this institutionalized narrative about what the Rwandan genocide was. And the whole narrative that it includes about fighting the FDLR. This is part of the narrative that identifies Tutsis as victims, Hutus as killers, Hutus as perpetrators. So the FDLR are perpetrators. They're an ever-present danger to Rwanda. They're constantly threatening to return and commit another Tutsi genocide. So that whole institutional narrative structure is reproduced in this agreement. Defensive measures.
Yes. Yes,
I,
and then you mentioned sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
no, I mean, it's just breathtaking. Defensive
It
measures.
is.
It is breathtaking.
It almost feels like only one party get to apply defensive measures, because again, there are hundreds of armed groups in the Congo. Hundreds. I'm not gonna lie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And throughout the 3 decades of this conflict, of this war and just war, we have
Mm-hmm.
seen a lot of a lot, maybe a few, but very powerful armed groups backed by Rwanda. So powerful, talking about the M23 right now,
Yeah.
at the point that the SNDF, I don't think that people actually understand to what extent the M23 or the RDF are powerful, which makes sense, getting this defense or military corporations with military agreements and corporate partnerships with NATO's nations. We're talking about Turkey, we're talking about Poland. They signed Paul Kagame Rwanda signed in 2022 in 2022 an agreement between Poland and Rwanda to get from Poland like ammunitions and weapons and all that. And again,
Interesting.
in Turkey, same thing, right? And we also know that the U.S. is also being involved, and the European Union,
Mm-hmm.
France in particularly, also has been providing money, like support for Rana's mission either in Mozambique and other places where French interests are. So
Mm-hmm.
the South African forces, I will say that flat out, was defeated in Goma for the fall of Goma. The UN, the United Nations peacekeeping force in the Congo, was defeated for the fall of Goma. For Goma to fall, the UN
Uh-huh.
had to like be defeated. We had, and that was also discussed in my previous show, like
Uh,
weapons that are Israeli made weapons, and that the UN group of experts
yeah,
did
yeah.
question the Israeli government regarding the presence of of that weapon. And to the point that the UN, in that very article, the very report that was published like this week, even though we have been reading leaked reports for like
Mm-hmm.
weeks now,
Mm-hmm.
they are flat out asking for an armed embargo against Rwanda. So you have that country that has, like I would say, impressive military arsenal, and they are backing M23, who has defeated the South African force in Congo, who has
Mm-hmm.
defeated the UN peacekeeping force MONUSCO, and it's that country that is having to support armed militia groups, like I mentioned. These armed militia groups are now or have been in the Congo, but not once you have heard that the Congo invaded Rwanda. Not once, not a single time. You
No, no.
heard military operations of Congolese forces, either led by current President Tshisekedi or former President Kabila at the time. You have never seen that, but we are told that what
That's,
Rwanda is doing is a defensive measure.
yeah, Kagame even said at one point, well, we can't fight this war in Rwanda, it's too small. But
Mm,
now they're saying uh, the agreement has, I'm not sure how specific it is about this, but the interpretation is that minerals will be processed in Rwanda. They'll be extracted in DRC and processed in Rwanda, which reproduces the neo-colonial model in which
mm,
um, mineral oil and agricultural products are exported at low prices and then returned as finished commodities. The country that does the processing and adds value creates a more complex, has a more complex division of labor, and it is able um, to interact in world trade in a way that a simple producer of minerals and agricultural products is not. And since there's been a war in Congo for so long, and in Eastern Congo, where these resources are being stolen, it doesn't have the infrastructure to support the minerals processing. And they look at Rwanda, where the war has not taken place, and Rwanda has what corporations and executives feel they need. It has clean streets, it has nice hotels, it has working internet, financial services.
It is civilized.
Yeah. And let's BTY. There's some. Now let me just go back for a minute. Earlier, when I was, preparing for this, I came up with a Human Rights Watch report that said Rwanda had been arresting the poor. It was solving its homeless problem in a way similar to what Trump is now proposing. Let's arrest and institutionalize poor people. But so you have this shiny city, clean streets, no homeless people, working internet. Let's process minerals there. Next door, we have Congo, which has been ravaged by 30 years of war, by 30 years of Rwanda's aggressive war. So Rwanda is being rewarded for all this.
Yeah.
Rwanda Rwanda is going to benefit from all this. And I think we should note that there were these sanctions, European and US sanctions, imposed when the outcry about what Rwanda was doing in Congo beginning in January, when it escalated an offensive to create facts on the ground, the facts on the ground that are now being reflected in these peace agreements. There was so much outrage that these sanctions were passed, but they're really toothless. Okay, they passed these sanctions. Now, with these agreements, Rwanda is being rewarded for 30 years of aggression in DRC. Like I said, defensive measures.
That's crazy.
I mean, the word breathtaking. I think we need to. Use that description. This description of Rwanda's presence in Congo or defensive measures, that's breathtaking.
Talking about another narrative that has been out there, and you mentioned that, it is the continued use of the FDLR, and then you mentioned as the reason why we've seen increase Rwandan military presence in the Congo, branded as a defensive measure. So despite decades, as you mentioned, of UN reports, and last week I actually went all the way to 2002, reading about when the Congo and Rwanda signed an accord, peace agreements. They were mentioning in that accord, in that report, the Interamwe. That was in 2002. That was 2 years after the FDLR was created. So the FDLR was not genocide. They were not national threats at the point that they were only mentioning Interamwe, right? So after that agreement was signed, now we've seen it was no longer about the Interamwe, it was now FDLR, and that has been the narrative ever since. What do you make of that continued use of the FDLR?
Well, it's just like a rote recitation. Every time Rwanda's presence Rwanda's aggression in DRC is questioned, there's this rote recitation. Rwandan genocide, FDLR are the descendants of the genocidaires. We have to be there to fight to protect against them, even as we shovel God knows how many millions or billions of dollars worth of coltan out of the country. Or we have to, Rwandan genocide, have to go in to protect against the genocidaires who still exist in the DRC, and we have to protect the Congolese Tutsi. That's the other narrative that was added. We have to protect the Congolese Tutsi from these genocidaires. One of the things that Victoire Ingabire has said is that Rwanda should negotiate with these refugees. These are refugees and the children of refugees, of Rwandan refugees who fled from his army. They were fleeing an aggressive army that had massacred hundreds of thousands of Hutu people, and they were fleeing into the Congo. And then his army chased them all the way across the Congo. Hundreds of thousands of Rwandans struggled for years from Eastern Congo to the Western borders, where some of them were able to find refuge and secure asylum, but some great number of them were forced back to Rwanda by the UNHCR, even though they were afraid, and they had every reason to be afraid of returning. So I got lost there for a minute. I was talking about Victoire negotiating with refugees. Okay, Victoire has said that Rwanda should negotiate with the FDLR and with other, not all the Rwandan refugees in Eastern DRC are FDLR. I understand FDLR as initially being a defensive militia to defend the refugee community from the aggression of the RPF crossing the border to hunt them down. And in most cases try to force them back into Rwanda because they didn't want a Rwandan community outside Rwanda that might, for one, like Victoire, speak out about the reality of the Rwandan genocide narrative, the reality of the electoral democracy fraud in Rwanda. And I'm sure there was fear. There was especially initially fear of an attempt to return to Rwanda militarily, but Rwanda, the Rwandan refugees, the FDLR, they don't have anything like that kind of military capacity to return and cause a problem in Rwanda, to threaten Rwanda's security. That's a fraud. They don't have that kind of military capacity, but it's an excuse constantly that Rwanda is threatened. But Victoire has said that Rwanda should negotiate with the refugees. And that's never, and the response is always, oh my God, no, they're genocidaires. They're all killers. We can't negotiate with killers. It's like Hamas, no, we can't negotiate with them. But at the same time, M23, who are largely Rwandan Tutsi, or Rwandan Congolese Tutsi who have been fighting under Rwandan command throughout their existence. They're supposed to negotiate. The DRC is supposed to negotiate with them, but Rwanda is not supposed to negotiate with the Rwandan refugees.
And not just negotiate with them, but also integrate them in the army, right? That's what we read in the accord. They're asking the Congolese government to integrate the M23 fighters, I will call them fighters, into the army, the same M23 accused of war crimes by Human Rights Watch, by Amnesty International, the same one of that have slaughtered or decimated entire villages, not just in 2021, not just in 2022, not just this year, but the entire time that organization existed, since the creation in 2012, I believe. That's when M23 was created by one of the co-founder, Bosco Tangana, who's right now serving 30 years in jail for crimes against humanity and war crimes. And they're asking Congolese people in that accord to integrate them in the army, versus what we see or what we read about the FDLR. They use the language as neutralize.
Exactly. I think since you mentioned Bosco Ntaganda, we should note something about that. I followed that process. I followed the official statements that were put out by the ICC at the time that he was going on trial. And at first, they identified him as a Rwandan. They said, we believe him to be of Rwandan nationality. This was
Yes.
the leader of the M23. Previously, he had been involved in all the previous iterations of M23, which were other militias under Rwandan command. And then on his first day in court, Ntaganda stood up and said that he was Congolese. And they agreed to try him as Congolese. And so ultimately, it served Rwanda's purposes because it removed them from culpability. If he was not fighting under Rwandan command, if he was just a Congolese rebel, then Rwanda was absolved. And it looked like the international community had done something. By trying and imprisoning Bosco Ntaganda, they had done something. When, as Vava Tampa wrote in The Guardian at the time, this is really a defeat for Congolese because he was tried as a Congolese, not as a Rwandan.
And it's very important what you're saying, because I've argued that in my post and I got attacked, obviously,
Of course.
for saying that. But that was the BBC article, right? And people can find it. And there was also, I think I've showed a couple weeks ago when I was going over his profile. I'm not sure if I think it's probably too small. Let me zoom in. So that's from the BBC, and it's also obviously the ICC website, the UN. They talk about it. And Bosco Ntaganda was born in Rwanda, where he grew up. That's one thing that I really want people to know, right?
Absolutely.
And then he fled to the DRC as a teenager after attacks on fellow ethnic Tutsis. So he's Tutsis. At 17, so he was a minor. From the Congolese perspective, and I will say even most countries in the world, at 17, you're a minor. He was fighting as a minor, as a child, alongside Paul Kagame. And then in 2002, suddenly, right? And obviously, like what this is not saying is that in 1996 he joined the AFDL. So that's why it says here, alternating between being a rebel and a soldier in both Rwanda and DR Congo. So he came in the Congo as, I would say, a rebel in 1996. And in 2002, because of the accord that I mentioned, the Pretoria Accords, where we had to, the Congolese government at that time was forced for the very first time, I would say, to integrate those leaders, those militias leader into the army. So that's how he became one of the generals of the army. So when the ICC put out an arrest warrant, like a warrant of arrest for Bosco Ntaganda, and that was in 2006. They say Bosco Ntaganda, whose photographer next, who is believed to be a national of Rwanda around 30. So I always want to challenge just folks thinking in general, folks following us, and even Congolese people, and even Rwandan citizens themselves. It's like, when we say that he's Congolese, at what point exactly did he become Congolese? Because when you're born in a country, grew up there, was he a Congolese because his parents was a Congolese? In what process or administrative process in a region that we know has almost never been under the control of the current government? Like 1996 Rwanda invasion, like Mobutu doesn't control the East, right? And Laurent Desire Kabila take over in 1997. 1998, the RCD start the rebellion, and RCD is another armed groups backed by Rwanda. The Congolese government does not control the East. So in what process did this man become Congolese? These are actually serious questions that we should be asking ourselves. And if that process was like fraudulent, right? Where obviously, like, you have all the reasons to have him as labeled as the Congolese, the same way that we had James Kabarebe, the current Minister of Foreign Affairs of Rwanda, former Minister of Defense of Rwanda, former, I would say, special advisor in terms of in charge of defense of Paul Kagame of Rwanda. He was in 1996, 1997, the Congolese Army Chief of Staff. So we need to ask those questions. So when you have the judge Sylvian Steiner and the judge Akua actually with the presiding judge Claude
Mhm.
Jordan, they write this warrant of arrest. They say explicitly that he's believed to be Rwandan nationality. So we don't know exactly who the person is, if he's Congolese, if he's not. And yes, you're right. When he presented himself, he said that he was Congolese, and
Yeah.
that, without any pushback, that was a really blow, not just to Congolese, like you said, but I will also say there was a blow to also the international justice system.
I was communicating with somebody. I can't remember what his official status was, but because I was following this on the court records, I wrote to someone and said, "You first said that Ntaganda is Rwandan. You said you believe him to be a Rwandan national. Why did you suddenly decide to try him as Congolese?" And he said, "Because Ntaganda stood up in court and said he was Congolese on his first day in court." And I pressed him about that further, and he just stopped talking to me.
Wow.
And I think the important thing to understand about Ntaganda, his nationality, and his loyalties, is that he spent his whole life fighting under Rwandan command. It doesn't matter whether he was in Congo at this time, Rwanda at that time. He went to Rwanda to fight under Kagame and Kagame's war to seize power in Rwanda, all 4 years of that war. Then he came into Congo, I believe, with the first invasion, again, fighting under Rwandan command. M23 and all these Rwandan militias that preceded it have been under Rwandan command. So the point is, Uganda has been under the command of a foreign army for his entire military and political career.
And so, since we talk about the foreign army being Rwanda commanding, M23 commanding, CNDP before M23 commanding,
Right.
RCD before CNDP, and commanding AFDL,
Right.
should you say, Anne, that Congo, or let me rephrase it,
Okay.
should Rwanda's action in the Congo, in the DRC, be considered as a foreign occupation?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the decision to incorporate the CNDP into the Congolese army in 2009, in case people probably there are people listening who don't remember this, but in 2008, the CNDP, which was the predecessor of M23, was ravaging the Eastern Congo, as these, as these militias have over and over again. And then was actually on Obama's inauguration day. Often these things happen when the world's attention is focused on something else. But on Obama's inauguration day, it was suddenly announced that the CNDP would be integrated into the Congolese army, which is even Human Rights Watch acknowledged at the time that was a de facto, that it was a surrender of territory, that it was in fact a surrender of territory masked as something else, masked as incorporating these Congolese rebels into the Congolese army. And at that time, we're talking about U.S. involvement. At that time, the humanitarian interventionist crowd, Susan Rice, John Prendergast, Samantha Power, they all applauded. They all said, "Oh, this is a wonderful development. This is a step towards establishing peace in the Congo."
It's really fascinating because now, while I was still in the Congo, right, and getting the news, as I always in my conversation internally with friends of the Congo, internally when we discuss, I always tell them that back home, the information, because we didn't have access to the internet like people do right now. So the information was really censored, was really filtered, right? Because we know that Joseph Kabila, who took over from his father after his father was assassinated,
Mm-hmm.
as if he were in the kingdom,
Mm-hmm.
came Joseph Kabila, who's right now in Goma with the rebels,
Mm-hmm.
came in the Congo as a rebel himself, backed by Rwanda, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when we had these stories about the CNDP, the M23 in 2012, the CNDP in 2008, 2009, the information was not raw. It was manipulated. And you're absolutely right now that I think about it. When Goma fell, I think in 2008,
Right.
it's Obama has just been elected president. And there is
Right.
that transition
Mm-hmm.
of power. And
Mm-hmm.
he swore in January 2009. Guess
Mm-hmm.
what? It's the same thing, at least that I remember because it's recent, in 2025. Goma falls literally in January 2025. We are again in that transition of power
That's
between
interesting.
Democrats and
Yeah.
Republicans. I'm not sure about 2012 or, but at least 2000. You mentioned 2008, and and I have to say that the same thing happened this year when we had this transition of power between the Democrats of Joe Biden handing the power to Donald Trump, Trump being sworn as the president of the United States. We are in January 2025, and that's when Goma falls.
But the process has advanced further. In 2008, the CNDP seized Goma, and then they were somehow forced to retreat. I think the international community insisted on that at the time.
Mhm.
Um, and but then there was this incorporation of the CNDP into the army.
Mhm.
Um, this time, the process has advanced further because they seized Goma. As Maurice has pointed out, they moved at the beginning of January to establish facts on the ground so that when they're going into these negotiations, they're in control of Goma, they're in control of Bukavu. Um, they seized Goma and Bukavu, and this time they held on to them. And then we got this peace agreement, so-called, um, in which M23 was identified as a legitimate Congolese entity that the DRC had to negotiate with, even though we all know, and it's been proven over and over again and reported by UN investigators, that they are a Rwandan militia fighting under Rwandan command, regardless of whether or not some of them have Congolese citizenship. So here we are with the process that much more advanced.
So if it's an occupation, you agree on that. I agree
Absolutely.
on that. Friends of the Congo agrees on that.
Mm-hmm.
How come the international community does not treat it as an occupation? And even Human Rights Watch in that report says Congo is occupied territory. That's
Mm-hmm.
how they call now that
Mm-hmm.
region. Why do you think that the international community talk about other countries? They don't treat that as an occupation. They don't treat the crisis or the conflict as an occupation.
Because it's working out very well for a lot of people. Like I said, they passed these sanctions in response to outcry about the Rwandan violence and atrocities, but they didn't change. That didn't change anything. It didn't stop the occupation or the plunder. And then we had facts on the ground going into these negotiations. Rwanda had established its facts on the ground. So why not? Because it's working out. It's because it's working out well for powerful people. Because the tech barons lined up to sign deals, which are not going to be favorable to DRC. To sign deals to exploit lithium and whatever else, the Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, whichever the other tech barons are in on this. It's going to work out well for them. It's going to work out. It has worked out for powerful people all along. And the proposed agreement is something that will work out. They'll be able to continue to exploit Congolese resources, and they'll have this place in Rwanda, that hasn't suffered 30 years of war, where the streets are clean, the homeless people have been imprisoned, the internet works, and the hotels are nice. And there's even a big convention and center and sports events. Victoire wrote a piece that was published by Al Jazeera a few weeks before she was arrested, in which she said that the voices of the voiceless had to be included in the peace negotiations and the peace agreement for it to establish real peace. Obviously, that hasn't happened.
Yeah.
But, you know, and because it's so hard to turn the world's attention to anything in Africa, this just doesn't get, and because it's a proxy war, it's always been a proxy war with Rwandan forces representing U.S. and multinational corporate interests. It doesn't draw the attention the way that Israel's violence in Gaza, and pounding it with U.S. bombs for, what is it, 2.5 years now, I think. It just doesn't draw that kind of attention. It's hard to understand. I mean, even progressive-minded anti-war Americans that I know who are distraught about Gaza, you know, and desperate to be able to do something. They understand, at most, I think, that there's huge violence here, that it's about the minerals, and that maybe they should understand something further about it, but it's just not brought to their attention that often, and it's not explained. I always feel, I so often feel like I have to start from square one. So that's part of the reason that the world tolerates it in a way that they're not tolerating what's going on in Gaza. I mean, the community that is distraught about Gaza has not been able to stop it, but at least they are distraught. They understand it, and people keep trying to do something about it. Like Malaysia is trying to organize a freedom flotilla of 1,000 ships to break the blockade, and people keep protesting. There's nothing like that for Congo because people just don't understand it, because it's been a proxy war, and because it's just so hard to turn any attention to Africa. I was talking yesterday about the 2020-2022 war in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
And I went to Ethiopia for 2.5 months at the time, and most people I knew didn't even know that there was a war going on there. And it was devastating. Hundreds of thousands of people died. The U.S. was very involved in backing the group that started the war. When I tried to explain this, I was starting from square one. So again, when you ask why does the world tolerate it, because it's working out very well for powerful people, and you know, as long as the minerals keep flowing, no one and people don't understand it. There are very few people trying to stop it. Something I'm going to attempt to do is see if I can interest Code Pink in this. I'm going to see if I can interest Code Pink in Victoire's case.
Yeah.
Because that, you know, is one of the most prominent and effective peace organizations in the United States.
Yeah.
So, and they have not understood it in the past. The one thing that they had done was to promote Eve Engler, whose issue was rape. I mean, she's a feminist, and her issue was rape as a weapon of war. But she didn't understand the conflict any broader than that. And that was the one engagement that I know Code Pink to have made with the Congo.
And I'm pretty sure they'll be down for it because Code Pink has, in my knowledge, we did collaborate. That I
Mhm.
think I saw a
We
video
did. Okay.
of them in Congress March. So they are trying to, and again, that's when you come in because the mainstream media really has hard time putting Congo on the map, let alone discuss the story of the Congolese from a
Mhm.
Congolese or victim perspective. And what we see is not necessarily what we see on TV, on the news, what's going on. It's not necessarily what's going
Mhm.
on the grounds, talking about the peace deal, the peace accords, when folks are continue to being riled up and killed or being sent, forcibly removed from their home or the land. And it's just a different story, like that is really far from the reality. Um,
Mhm.
but you mentioned the justice components.
But
Uh,
we just about
yeah.
there are all these stupid headlines. Will the peace deal work? Well, will the peace agreement work? Blah blah blah. FDLR, contain FDLR, negotiate with M23, as though this is all rational.
Mm.
Will it work? I mean, these are stupid headlines and stupid reporting.
And people don't ask the most pertinent question in terms of like the resolution 2773 by the UN
Mhm.
that is asking or requiring Rwanda to withdraw his troops completely and entirely from the Congo without any preconditions. But what we see the Washington Accord, we see conditions of defensive measures. For Rwanda to lift the
Yeah,
defensive measure,
exactly.
they have, or the Congo first needs to neutralize the FDLR,
FDLR, yeah, which they haven't neutralized.
which is a contradiction, right? We agree on what the UN resolution is saying regarding Rwanda's presence in the Congo.
Well, didn't the UN resolution also say that M23 had to withdraw from its positions? I believe it did.
It was talking about, I can pull that up. It was specifically talking about Rwanda because again, the UN, the whole world knows that we shouldn't even talk about M23 in terms of capability to overpower the UN because Bintou Keita, the head of the Congo's mission, the UN peacekeeping mission in the Congo, said that Rwanda, the M23, is no longer operating as a conventional militia groups. They are literally conducting themselves as an army that has a
Mhm.
sophisticated weapon that surpass those of the
The
UN.
Congolese
Can you
army.
imagine that? Like the United Nations
Yeah,
has weapons that are less sophisticated than M23. So I can pull it up, but I'm pretty sure 100% confident that that resolution talks specifically about Rwanda government, about Rwanda removing itself, withdrawing his troops from the Congo.
oh no, it specifically does that. I thought that it also said that M23 had to withdraw from, well, it called on M23. I mean, these resolutions are lame because they just call on Rwanda or M23 to do that. There's no enforcement mechanism.
I
And
have
there are
it
no sanctions.
pulled
There are
up
no
here.
sanctions serious enough. I mean, serious sanctions can be imposed, but there were no serious sanctions imposed. When you sanction individuals, that doesn't make any difference. As I wrote in the last piece I wrote about Congo, the most serious sanction, which is imposed only on Russia, North Korea, and Eritrea, is exclusion from the SWIFT system for conducting international financial transactions. No one's ever
Mm,
imposing that on Rwanda.
yes, that's what happened to Russia, right?
That happened to Russia in 2021. It was imposed on Eritrea.
Eritrea as well. Okay, I did not know
Eritrea.
that. And actually, there is someone, shout out to you, straight out of Eritrea, that has been commenting nonstop. So shout out to them. And you
Okay.
mentioning that, I just clicked. So yeah.
Okay. Good. Yeah, I think the DPRK, the DPRK and Syria have been excluded from the SWIFT system for a long time. But now that I can't remember his name, but he was the founder of Jabhat al-Nusra, which is an al-Qaeda affiliate. Now that he's the new president of Syria, we removed that most serious of sanctions from Syria, the exclusion from the SWIFT system for conducting international financial transactions.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know about, Has there ever been an arms embargo on Rwanda?
Arms embargo, not that I know of. The Child Soldier Prevention Act, there were the name just appeared in 2023, I believe,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
that is restricting the U.S., the United States, particularly only the United States,
mhm,
possibility to sell weapons directly to Rwanda. But there are obviously conditions.
mhm.
But I've never heard. Maybe if somebody from the team knows, they can just ping me a message. But I've never heard of an arm embargo. As a matter of fact, the UN resolution that literally just came out a few weeks ago
Mhm.
specifically calls on an arm embargo against Rwanda. But we can get back to that.
Yes,
I pulled out that's the
27,
UN Security
yeah,
Resolution, and the first time that I mentioned the M23, I'm not sure. Let me know if it's too small. If you
I
can
can
read
see
it,
it.
it's can you read it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
You're
It
doing is
says M23 with direct support and participation of Rwanda Defense Force. That's the first time that I mentioned that.
uh-huh,
Uh, talk about the human rights abuses and violation law by the M23. That's the second
uh-huh.
time. And then forcibly displaced person in Eastern DRC caused by the advance of the M23. And then again, the fact that they had to specify right
Mhm.
here between parentheses and say that with the direct support and participation, people can understand that
Yeah,
they can literally substitute M23
yeah.
with the RDF. And they're condemning the advance of the M23 and then with the support of the RDF, of course, and then decide that M22 shall immediately cease hostility, withdraw from
Was
Goma.
withdraw from
Yeah.
government. That's what I thought it said. Government.
Yes, yes, you
Yeah.
are correct, and I apologize.
No,
Yes,
no need to apologize. It's one thing
yeah,
I did remember.
yeah,
And obviously that didn't happen in this peace agreement. There was no demand that M23 withdraw from Goma and Bukavu, the capitals of
yes,
North and South Kivu provinces. Instead, uh, there was this decision that M23 is a legitimate Congolese entity representing a legitimate Congolese constituency that the DRC has to negotiate with. And so
yeah,
this is going to be a larger, more formal concession of territory. Like I said, the 2009 agreement was a de facto concession of territory. And we've advanced to the point where um, it's going to be a formal concession of territory. The one thing that won't be admitted is that it's a concession of territory to Rwanda. But the
mm-hmm.
next step that I know we can anticipate is some sort of referendum or attempt to create an independent Republic of the Kivus,
Yes,
which could ultimately hold another referendum to join Rwanda. And
yes.
that's been the ultimate goal all along. And
There is a comment that I would like kind of like us to address. I really
sure, go
find it
ahead.
really
Go
funny.
ahead. Go
So
ahead.
this one first. Travis believes the contradiction is that you want Rwanda to withdraw, but you don't say the same about the French who's there. First of all, clarification. Travis believes it's not us, right? I don't know what you mean by us. It's not Anne. It's not Gaëtan. It's not Friends of the Congo. It's not us. It's the UN Security Council. So maybe let's just put those facts
Mm-hmm.
right there. And the UN Security Council is composed by many parties, including Rwanda's most faithful ally, the US. The US are the UN Security Council, the United Kingdom, France, China, and Russia. And all of them, it was not just those five, but also 10 non permanent members. 15 nations voted in favor of this resolution, 15-0,
Mm-hmm.
asking the Rwanda government to withdraw its forces from the DRC territories. So
Calls, calls,
yeah,
calls on.
calls. So
Which
it's a
nothing.
thank you. They are literally requiring to say, hey, y'all, you need to get out of the Congo. So it's not us talking, it's the UN Security Council. So and then also the claim that French are there, I really want to know what do you mean the French are there? Are you talking about the French army? Because that's not true. There is absolutely no evidence. I'm not sure if you have even been in the Congo. There is no French army in the Congo. So right there, I think and then okay, you commented again.
I
Y'all
think
got more smoke for Rwanda and European. No, we're not. We're just calling out the facts and we're just asking for justice. I think you probably have an issue with us speaking the truth, right? Like it's not about you. You should ask yourself. The Congo has 9 neighbors. Why are we not talking about Tanzania? Why are we not talking about Burundi? Why are we not talking about Congo Brazzaville? We are talking about Rwanda because Rwanda is the occupier in this instance. So we're not going to derail. We're not going to stop talking about Rwanda. And you say European powers. We talked about like literally multinationals company. We are consistently calling out Europeans, calling out the West, including the United States, for how they are literally profiting. And then maybe you came too late in this show, but I did announce that we are going to break down the deal with a really special guest from the Oakland Institute who are going to dive with us and explain specifically how the West is profiting or destabilizing the country. So now we don't have smoke for we don't have smoke with Ron like you're saying. So anyways,
what's I don't understand. What is the comment? What is the assertion?
yes, they say y'all got more smokes for Rwanda than the Europeans' power to continue to destabilize. Oh, and then they clarified. They said the French mercenaries. In this specific show, I talked about the mercenaries, which is a violation of international law. We have said that multiple times. So I don't know what you're talking about. The mercenary brought by President Tshisekedi was talked about in this very podcast. By the way, those mercenaries were defeated, by the way, right? By the M23,
Yeah.
just defeated the SND of the South African forces. And we have seen videos, literally footages of those mercenaries hired by Tshisekedi, who is not democratic elected. And we say that. So I have absolutely no fear. It's Congo Unfiltered to tell the truth. And I'm not going to side with
Um,
anyone, if
uh-huh.
not just the victims. So yes, the mercenaries, French mercenaries. That before you had said French. So when you said
Mhm.
France, obviously the underlying issues was the French government, and I had to clarify there is no French army in the Congo present right now. The French military or the French mercenaries hired by President Tshisekedi, that has been denounced in this very show. So thank you. So sorry, I just wanted to address because these are the people who I would say either are misinformed or are just trying to derail. But I think it's very important sometimes to challenge those people in about how they're even phrasing the conversation. And they said, "Bro, you are headquartered in the U.S. You are found by the U.S. No, we're found by the people. Thank you so much." But
We're funded by
anyway,
the U.S. We've been criticizing the U.S. throughout this podcast.
this to our this podcast, we have been criticizing the government. But anyways, they're probably in Rwanda
Yeah,
right
no,
now.
we've said over and over that Rwanda is a proxy. Rwanda is a
Yes.
proxy for all the Western forces, the Western governments and corporations who have been benefiting from this for the past 30 years at catastrophic cost to the Congolese people.
Yeah, that's funny. And now the denial. Okay, the
Rwanda,
Rwana's military is not in Congo either. All right, that's when I know that are trolls. But okay, I'm gonna stop
yeah,
that.
let's okay, that's enough.
Anyways,
I believe
but
that. I'm
sorry.
gonna say that. Go ahead. Try reading uh, the last year and a half of UN group of experts reports, or go back 20 years, go back 25 years.
Yes. Even footages, videos, literally of the president of Kagame disagree with you. He said he was asked by C if the Rwanda troops was in the Congo. He did not say no. The Congolese army, the Rwandan army is not in the Congo. That's not what Paul Kagame said. He said he doesn't know. So I don't know why Travis believes has or how they have information that the Rwandan troops are not in the Congo when the president of Rwanda doesn't even know that. So that's very interesting. But back to the conversation that we were having.
Go ahead.
and talking about this aspect of justice, right? Because that's
Yeah.
essentially talk about uh, well, accountability. If I would say the possibility of accountability,
Uh-huh.
um, which is something that we don't see in the report at all.
Uh-huh.
Not the report, the deal, the Washington Accord,
Yeah.
and also the Doha. And I really want to show that Doha really quick. Where is it? Uh, oh, there you go. Maybe go. I'm not sure. Um, this is something that. Oh, it's not on yet. This is the possibility of a peace, how to even bring justice, is even uh, justice a possibility? That is not something that we see. It's not mentioned or it's not talked about. How are we going to have justice? How are we going to have accountability, not accord? And also in this particularly principle signed between M23 and the Congolese government, same thing. So with uh, millions people dead, mostly women and children, and until today, no international tribunal for the Congo. And I know that you have some criticism about the international tribunal for Rwanda, but do you see a path forward for justice in the Congo, and how does accountability or real justice look like?
Well, I do I do think that international courts, like the decision to call something a genocide, typically they have served imperial purpose. There has not been another regional court created since, I can't think of an international court that has been created since the ICTR. And when I was making notes ahead of this about points we should hit, one I absolutely wanted to hit was the ICTR. The ICTR was created to enforce this narrative, which, if you look into it, had been planned in advance. This Tutsi genocide narrative had been planned in advance. Even on July 29th, Anthony Lake, who was high up in the Clinton administration, in his inner circle, came out and said, well, I mean, he was even glowing. He was like glowing that Kagame had seized power in Rwanda, and said that we'd be in conversation with him. And someone in the press pool asked him, well, will you be talking to both sides? He said, oh, no, we won't be talking to the other side because they committed genocide. This was before there had been any time to do the sort of serious study that it would take to determine what had actually happened.
So there was no due process. They were presented as the victims. Oh, not sorry.
They were right. Yeah, and
Yes.
it was clear that this had been agreed to in advance. And then the International Criminal Tribunal on Rwanda was created to reinforce and further institutionalize that narrative. And Ramsey Clark, who was one of the lawyers for the defense at the ICTR, called it war by other means. And the other ICT lawyers I have known, the defense lawyers, have said the same thing. And typically that's what international courts have been. That's what the International Criminal Tribunal on Rwanda was. It was created to reinforce NATO's excuse for breaking up Yugoslavia and for bombing and breaking up Yugoslavia.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I've sometimes heard Congolese activists say, well, Rwanda had its International Criminal Tribunal. Congo deserves one too. But Congo should not want anything remotely like what the International Criminal Tribunal in Rwanda was, because it was created to institutionalize a Western narrative, a Western and Rwandan narrative that was then used to justify 30 years of aggression in Congo. I mean, the narrative that came out of the ICTR has justified 30 years of aggression, 30 years of Rwandan aggression in Congo. And so the idea of being able to create an international court, these international courts are created by the UN Security Council, I believe. I think it's very remote. But since you now have sort of a deadlock between Russia and China and the European powers with their veto power on the UN Security Council, I think that's one reason that an international court has not been created since. For example, there's no international court that has been created about Ukraine, and there won't be because of the division on the UN Security Council. When I talked to Benedicta Nyoko about this, we talked about African courts and whether there is any promise in an African court. Like there is the African Court of Human and People's Rights, and Congo has a case now that's still underway. It's sort of, it's sort of contradictory in that the peace agreement presents Rwanda as a defensive power and taking defensive measures in DRC, whereas this case that DRC brought against Rwanda at the African Court of Human and People's Rights accused it of being an aggressive power, of invading and plundering DRC. So while that case is still underway, this agreement has been made. That court is the same court that ruled that Victoire Ingabire had been unjustly tried, had her civil rights denied, hadn't received a fair trial. They don't have any enforcement power. I mean, the International Criminal Tribunal on Rwanda and the Tribunal on Yugoslavia and the ICC have had the power to issue Interpol warrants and require various foreign governments to arrest. I mean, I'd like to think there's some sort of way to create a court that would establish justice in DRC.
Then what is Ann Garrison's version of justice for the Congo then? Like, and I do understand your concern and what you pointed out about the ITCR, the International Tribunal for Rwanda, and how essentially what I'm getting from you is that you don't believe in not even the defense lawyers and folks representing those branded or called in even sentence as genocidaires, those who committed genocide in Rwanda. There wasn't really a due process in terms of like the ITCR looking and asking questions. To say, okay, is there a possibility that people on, like I read last week, I spent 3 hours on this show trying to go through the arguments of the FDLR as force threatening the national security of Rwanda, that has been justifying why Rwanda is in the Congo in the first place. And then what we read from the Spanish court, the same ITCR, they were saying that they have reason to believe that the Rwandan government was involved in what, not just the genocide itself, but also what led to it, and also the other crime that followed, and that we never saw anything against Paul Kagame or James Kabarebe and any other Rwandan officials ever since, right? So I understand your perspective about that.
But wait,
but then what's your version? What's your version of justice then for the Congo? What would real accountability look like for you?
Well, first, I think one thing I didn't make clear about the ICTR is that the ICTR tried only Tutsis. It never tried a single Hutu, and there were several chief prosecutors and investigators who got ready
There
to.
was not a Hutu among those who were
Not
tried?
a single Hutu. The only people tried at the ICTR were Tutsis. That's why I said it institutionalized the narrative that has since been used to justify 30 years of Rwandan aggression in DRC, because it institutionalized the narrative that only Hutus were perpetrators and only Tutsis were victims. And there were several prosecutors and investigators who prepared, several prosecutors with investigative support who prepared to indict Kagame. They prepared to, I mean, there in these courts, there are people, with legal training and good intentions who want to do the right thing. They were prepared to indict Kagame for assassinating the Rwandan and Burundian presidents, which was, of course, what triggered the violence. What finally triggered violence after 4 years of war, what triggered the violence that the world knows about, the final 90 days of massacres. I think it was Carlos.
I think I think just to correct you, I think you meant that the only people tried were Hutus. There was not a single.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I got that absolutely wrong. I'm sorry.
Okay. I was like, wait, what? Yes.
No,
okay.
yeah,
It's all right.
That was totally wrong. Yeah, the only people tried. Thank you. The only people tried were Hutus.
Yes.
And
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So it created the narrative that all the perpetrators were all Hutus, the victims were all Tutsis, and therefore you have this narrative support for the 30 years of war in DRC. And as I was saying, there were several prosecutors who prepared to indict Kagame for, the leader of the Tutsi army, now the leader of the de facto Tutsi government, for assassinating the Rwandan and Burundian presidents. And Carla Del Ponte was going to do that. And there's a UN official, I can't remember which one it was, who told her she can't do that. And she said, I don't work for you, I work for the court. And he said, yeah, we'll see about that.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah. And if you read the court documents, the sort of preamble.
It was a Spanish judge, by the way, right? Presiding the ICTR. Actually,
which one?
Let me rephrase it. It was a Spanish judge, or the Spanish court, that wanted to that said specifically, and I talked about it last week, that Paul Kagame was responsible of many crimes, including what is believed to have killed President Habyarimana, but they couldn't try him because he was a head of state. That was a Spanish judge. Sorry, I'm saying that to respond to Travis in the comment, who's still trying to argue. But yeah.
Well, no, there was a Spanish court that tried to try top
general officials.
Officials in the Tutsi army, including Kayuma Nyamwasa and I believe James Kabarebe.
Yes, but he was there too.
Yeah,
number 2 actually.
9 top officers. He did not indict Kagame because there was some kind of law saying you couldn't indict that indicting a sitting state would be an act of war. But the Spanish court was something quite different from the ICTR. The Spanish court was something that it's a famous, I can't remember his name, famous judge who argued the principle of universal jurisdiction. And I think also had an argument that there were some Spanish citizens, I think maybe nuns, religious figures who went down in the plane, and that therefore had standing to indict these people. I can't remember what ultimately happened with that case, but there was one in France. Jean-Louis Bruguière brought a case against Kagame, and claiming the same thing, the principle of universal jurisdiction.
Interdiction. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And ultimately, because this has been a big struggle in France, because France created Operation Turquoise to help Rwandan refugees fleeing from Kagame's army, fleeing into DRC. And then they were condemned for that. And for years, Kagame was blaming France for everything, including Operation Turquoise. And there was a constant struggle in French politics. And I don't know exactly where all the pressure was coming from, but I'm sure some of it was coming from the US for France not to dispute the narrative that had been institutionalized at the ICTR and the one that the US had supported. What happened in the 90s, both in Rwanda and then in DRC, was in part the US displacement of France as the dominant power in the region. So this has gone back and forth in French politics, and somehow ultimately it was a political decision that the Bruges court would not be allowed to continue. He was replaced. There was some other French judge. They went to Rwanda and went through some procedure and decided no, that Kagame had not shot the plane down. Kagame had not ordered that the plane shoot down had not come from territory occupied by the Rwandan Patriotic Front, Kagame's army. But this was a political decision. So there are political decisions about how judicial procedures will advance. Yeah. And there are always people like Jean-Louis Bruguère and like the Spanish judge and like those who tried to indict Kagame at the ICTR who are trying to do the right thing. And sometimes, as at the ICTR, there is an alternative narrative that emerges. Like the defense attorneys at the ICTR kept fighting for their clients. And some were eventually acquitted. And at one point, the court ruled that there had been no conspiracy to commit genocide, which is one of the essential elements. There had been no conspiracy to commit genocide. But the court's spin, its PR, was all that there had been a conspiracy. And everything we've all known, even, no matter what happened in court, the court has a PR mechanism. Like if you go on their website and read about what they did and what they found, the dissident narrative that emerged in some of these cases doesn't appear there. So it assumes exactly, what we're saying, that Hutus were all guilty and Tutsis were all innocent. So can you get? I'm not sure. I mean, I know that this is important to a lot of people. The idea of justice to a lot of people I know. So I don't want to say it's not possible. But the only possibility I can imagine is an African court. And we're a long way from seeing an African court that all of the continent has bought into and that has created some kind of enforcement mechanism.
And don't get me wrong, and I'm absolutely not saying here that, because personally that's not what I believe right now, that international justice is a solution right now. That's not what I'm saying, because I do understand and recognize that it has its flaws in terms of dealing with the Congo's war the war in the Congo, the war in the Congo for the past 3 decades.
Yeah.
And as a Congolese citizen, I can say that the way the international justice has addressed or remained silent in addressing the issue in the Congo, to me is a problem. And also, because you mentioned multiple times here Gaza and Palestine, That is the most televised
Right.
issue
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
world right now, right?
Right. Yeah.
Where we actually seeing live children being killed,
Mm-hmm.
people being starving to death,
Mm-hmm.
literally, like
Literally
not
falling
just
down
on
the
our
street.
phones,
Yeah.
but also like the mainstream media constantly see that and talks about that. Yet when a warrant of arrest was issued against the prime minister of Israel, people talking about nations, including France, that Travis seems to have a beef with, even though
Mm-hmm.
uh, Rwanda right now
Beefing with.
is, even though right now France, Rwanda is the French soft power, because for
Mm-hmm.
years, even though Rwanda doesn't, Rwanda's official language is English, but there have been literally uh heading, or they have been, I would say, leading the francophonie, right? So it's
Oh yeah.
anyways. So we've seen how the world, or the Western world, has reacted to the possibility of justice in Gaza, which means, because as the the ICC prosecutor,
Mm-hmm.
Khan, I forgot his first name.
DreamCon.
Uh, yes, he literally issued an arrest warrant not just against the prime minister of Israel, but also leaders of Hamas. So there was Hamas on one side committing war crimes
Yeah.
and crimes against humanity, if you want to put it that way, war crimes, but also the Israeli government official, not just making statements, but also carrying out actions. And he was stopped at the point that even the US had to sanction the ICC prosecutor.
Yeah. The U.S. sanctioned the prosecutor and somebody else at the court, I think, and then European governments didn't respect the indictment.
Yeah.
Netanyahu was allowed to fly over
He went
European.
to France. He
Yeah.
went to France months after that. So
Mhm.
I see that, and I see that, okay, there is definitely a problem with the way international law is being implemented or not implemented. We see the resolutions 2773 and how that is not being followed, and we see how literally right now head of states can make inflammatory speech and also go ahead and carry out those on the word, and kill people, displace folks,
Mhm.
starve people, and nothing happens to them. So I do recognize that there is an issue with international justice. And a few months ago, a couple months ago, I had Sly Mido, is the spokesperson of Congo's Action
Yeah.
platform that
Yes.
is campaigning Genocide. And
Uh,
he had a really interesting perspective, which is the whole argument of the Congress Action Move platform in the first place, this idea of genocide, and how the way even genocide in 1945 was created or defined, that definition seems to shield the West from their own crimes. Because when you look at what happened, maybe because they just didn't want to look at far in history, that could be the argument. But
yeah.
colonization was not that far. Like, Congo became independent in 1960. The Genocide Convention, I think, was like in 1945. So,
Yeah.
but they did everything in the way they phrased it so that colonizations is not seen as
It's genocide.
genocides, when you have to go in because you want the minerals, you want to exploit,
Uh, oh yeah.
you
Okay.
kill,
Absolutely.
and you
Yeah.
create conditions in which the people can either not reproduce themselves or cannot kill, that you destroy in whole or in parts population. You will not call it genocide. And that's why the Congolese people in London say, no, we really want to challenge this very notion of genocide, redefine it in a way that not just look at tribals conflicts, which mostly happen
Yeah.
in Africa, ethnic conflicts that mostly happen in other countries, because you don't see ethnic conflicts really in Western world. But we
Mhm.
also want to make sure that this idea of justice is also looking at, you know, the crimes committed by France in Algeria, the crime
Mhm.
committed by the British in Kenya, because
Mhm.
that's a really good case too, or
Mhm.
Namibia, right, by
No,
Germany. So he said that no, we shouldn't let the West or Europeans define what genocide is. We should be able to revisit that notion, that definition, and include. And that's why they came up with this idea that there is a genocide, people killed, displaced, or in part or in whole, people destroyed in part of a whole or in whole because of minerals, because of the resources
Yeah,
that they have,
okay.
is a genocide also. And I think we do recognize that there is definitely an issue with the international justice. Um, but then what we need to think collectively is what that justice, and I asked you that question, you said the African Court of Justice, that's an answer. But we need to collectively think about what this new idea of justice will look like for the weakest in conflicts, for the victims in conflicts. Not an idea of justice by the victors and for the victors, but for those who can no longer live because their houses have been bombed, can no longer go to school because they are forced to go from house to house or tent to tent to survive, right? People who are literally being raped in the tents because they live in refugee camps or they don't have means to defend themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like foreign nations that can enter in a country, plunder that country, kill the people with impunity. We need to be able to look at the idea of justice that was supposedly created to address that and see what has not worked in the past, why it's not working right now, why the International Criminal Court seems not to be allowed to do its job in some places now. We talked about Gaza, but also Russia, right? There's also like RS warrant against President Putin, right? And it's these very notions of justice that we need to challenge and try to redefine and see for Congolese people, for African people, what is justice right now for the millions of dead in the Congo? What would that justice look like? I think it's very important, and trust me, and I'm not saying that everything is perfect, that we should let no, I see how laws and things are being crafted to shield Paul Kagame,
Mm-hmm.
shield Western ally, France ally, because Travis think that we are running for France right now. No, France is doing what Kagame is doing what France wants in Mozambique right now. So
Yeah,
no.
yeah, it's working out. It's working out for both of them. Louise Mushikiwabo is the head of the Francophonie, and Rwanda is serving as France's mercenary, protecting Total Energy's interests in Mozambique. So it's working
Yep.
out for both of them.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's definitely a conversation that collectively we should be having
Uh-huh.
about what real accountability look like for the Congolese people. What real accountability look like even for Rwandan people right now. There are living under, I would say, oppression because we have a man who pretended he was elected by 99%. So 99% he's elected, therefore he's God, and no one can contradict him. No one can say anything. And same thing I could say also for the Congo, right? We also have people right now in power that literally think that they can do whatever they want. And then I saw your tweet, and that's maybe something to discuss. I also touched on
Uh-huh.
about how the Congolese government has started a process, or I would say trying to trial Joseph Kabila, right? And I know that you have some thoughts about that.
I
So
mean,
what do you think?
it's a nice idea, but he's in Congo. He's not in jail. And this peace agreement that has the U.S. approval, which is, you know, more force than any of these other things we're talking about represent. It says that M23 is a legitimate Congolese entity that the DRC has to negotiate with. So if Congo has agreed to this, so by agreeing to that agreement, Congo agreed to negotiate with M23 as though it were a legitimate Congolese entity, not a militia fighting under foreign command. What does it mean that this case continues at the African Court of Human and People's Rights? What does it mean that they're trying Kabila for treason, saying that he's involved with M23? That both of those prosecutions, the narratives of both of those prosecutions conflict with the narrative of the peace agreement.
I think what will happen eventually, and these are actually really good point and good questions, because if we check what happened in the past, right? Because what happened is that there was the Congolese government. I don't know if it was Joseph Kabila or his father, but it was definitely like the Kabila. They decided to try Rwanda and Uganda to the International Court of Justice, that literally is supposed to help nations deal with stuff that they don't agree with, instead of going with weapons. Yeah. That's just for the audience. International Court of Justice, an international criminal court.
ICJ, I believe in the ICJ, you can bring a nation.
Yes, ICJ trials nations. The nations is instance is accused, and in the ICC is actually the people. International Criminal Court, International Court of Justice. So the DRC brought and the DRC brought Rwanda and Uganda to the ICJ.
Right.
The ICJ said that Rwanda does not have the ICJ does not have jurisdiction to try Rwanda because they're not signatory of the treaty. I think that's how they frame it. So they ended up just going after Uganda, and Uganda ended up being sentenced, or was found guilty of committing war crimes in the Congo. And I think originally what the DRC had argued, they won like I think $1 billion of reparation, and that was reduced. But when Félix Tshisekedi got to power, they had just found guilty, like I mentioned, to pay. I think they were supposed to pay $360 million in reparation. But when Tshisekedi came and trying to negotiate the deal. I think he's actually the one that reduced it to $360 million. It was a little bit higher, but they agreed and he reduced it. And then they later signed a contract. The Ugandan government was supposed to create build a road in the Congo, from Congo to Uganda. And then it was a Ugandan company that this Ugandan civil society themselves, in the space hosted by Friends of the Congo, were saying that company has ties with the president of Uganda. So it was really fishy. So I think what we eventually happen, if we go, because right now they sign a declaration of principle, if you can put it that way, between it was signed in Doha between the cross in principle between the representative of the DRC government and the M23. And I think if we goes from that to the actually peace accord, like you mentioned, it's legitimizing and saying that, you know what, you guys are no longer recognized. You guys are not. It's essentially admitting that the M23 is a Congolese group. It's the Congolizations of the occupation. So you are essentially letting go the idea or the fact that it is the Rwandan government that is not just training, but also providing military support, money, weapons, and also boots on the ground. So it's like the Congolese government let go of that argument, even though it was documented by multiple credible sources. Organization. And so if we go that route, what will happen is that the Congolese government will have to somehow negotiate at the African court, so that I would say the sanction are being eased. Just like if I have to sue someone and then we decide to work it out, I can go ahead and withdraw my lawsuit. That happens. I think because that had happened with Uganda,
Mhm.
how things were negotiated. I think that's literally how we're going. It's the same path of trying to solve things, and now that's actually in the accord between Congo and Rwanda, and how they are supposed to deal with I would say issues, not necessarily goes hostile against one another, but use things, organizations or platform in place to be able to resolve the differences. So I think I'm speculating only, but I think that's where we're heading toward.
Towards a legitimation of the occupation.
If they sign it, that's essentially what that means, because that was also done in 2002. It means that you are no longer going after the fact that the Rwanda is occupying your country. You're saying that now M23 are Congolese, is 100% Congolese movements or rebel groups,
Mhm.
that 100% you have to integrate them in the army because that's what you signed in Washington.
Uh-huh.
You also agree with everything that they will be putting on the table, because it says there, right?
Mhm.
Lasting peace foundation, fully cooperate with international regional organization to ensure the ability to protect civilians, commit to pathway to resolve the dispute by peaceful means grounded in diplomacy and negotiation rather than hostile force and rhetoric,
Mhm.
commit to transcend the past and open. What the hell do you mean transcend the, anyways, sorry.
Transcend the
Transcend
past.
the past and
Yeah,
open a new
transcend the
chapter.
past. Okay,
Yeah,
like
like you killed millions of people. Let's just forget about it.
yeah,
Yeah.
legitimize the occupation.
And then commit to overcoming the division that weaken national unity, improving the living condition of the population, and rejecting all forms of dehumanization speech in order to promote peace and reconciliation. Of course, point two is the
But
ceasefire, the
dehumanize,
permanent
dehumanize.
ceasefire.
Go ahead.
Yeah, permanent ceasefire. That's the point two. Um, the parties acknowledge that peace, security, and stability are essential to increase the development of opportunities, commit to uphold the commitment to permanent ceasefire that include the following: air, land, sea, lakes attacks, as well as active sabotage, hate propaganda, any attempt to seize by force new position. This is interesting. New position, which means that the M23 gets to keep the position that they
Right.
have,
Exactly.
right? Yep.
Exactly. This.
Parties commit to ensure the ceasefire applies to all forces engaged in the conflict. Uh, Convene to refrain from any action that may hinder normal progress of ceasefire progress. And I think this is confidence building measures, take
I'm
measure
trying
to
to,
reassure the population,
I'm trying to
create
read.
favorable conditions for dialogue and leading to lasting peace.
Blah blah
Commit to,
blah.
yeah, yeah, it's essentially, yeah, restoring government authority. I was telling Brother Maurice that I did not want to read this because I know exactly where this is heading, and every time I read it, like right now, I'm pissed because of one, this is a concession on the government part,
Absolutely.
because and something that one of the leaders said, maybe it was yesterday or this morning.
Uh-huh.
He essentially said, talking to journalists, that he was actually giving all the peace accord that was signed in the past, and he said, and I just quote, "Is it is they, talking about the Congolese government or Congolese army, that will reintegrate into our army." And that was, what's his name, Benjamin Bonimpa from the
Mhm.
M23, saying that, hey, we're talking about integrating the army, but we're not gonna integrate your army, because every time that we have done it, and that's his argument, you
Mhm.
have prosecuted us, you had, sorry, persecuted us, you have put our people in jail. So we're not gonna make that same mistakes as in 2002. We're not gonna make the same mistakes as in 2009. We're not gonna make the same mistakes as in 2013. All these accords that were signed this time, you are going to integrate our army. Not sure what that means, but I think the very thing that is important, it says any attempt to seize by force new position on the ground. So right now, if this goes straight into accord, an agreement, the Congolese government accept to cede the position right now
Positions on the ground.
occupied by
Yeah,
M23,
yeah,
to
yeah.
let them be M23 territories, or if you say, because I say M23, but what I really mean is Rwanda territory,
Yeah,
uh, Rwanda occupying that territory. And something also very
yeah.
interesting, it says permanent ceasefire. It doesn't say immediate ceasefire. It also doesn't say when the ceasefire enters, like when are we going to see ceasefire? Exactly. It just says permanent, but when does it start to be permanent? Unclear. Just
Okay.
like it was unclear about the ceasefire in the Washington Accord. So sorry, I interrupted you, but I just wanted to go ahead and quickly read over a glance over this agreement that was signed.
No, thank you. There's only so much I can do, and I hadn't had time to read this yet, but I will read this as I continue to work on this piece about the peace agreement that I told you we're actually going to work on together, because I'm going to complete a draft and then ask you and several of your comrades to go over,
Absolutely, yeah.
go write it with me. So yeah, it legitimates the occupation. It disregards all the decades of UN reports, but most particularly the 2024 and 2025 reports that say that M23 is under Rwandan command, therefore it's a Rwandan militia, that it's integrated with the Rwandan army. This just disregards all that and says M23 is a legitimate Congolese entity distinct from the Rwandan army. The DRC has to negotiate with them, and it accepts facts on the ground, which is M23 in control of Goma and Bukavu, the capitals of North and South Kivu province. And one thing I wanted to say that I have been concerned about and wondered about is that there seems to have been a process over years of M23 and the Rwandan army displacing Congolese people and then moving Rwandan people across the border into their villages. So ultimately, if this process continues, then you can create a constituency for voting to create a Republic of the Kivus or even annexation to Rwanda. I don't know. I couldn't measure the extent of that process, how much it has achieved. But I've been reading about that for years, about Congolese people being displaced, winding up in IDP camps, and Rwandans then moving in to take their property and their villages. And that was in the most recent report, the one that came out in June.
Did you read, by any chance, human rights reports on that particular issue that you're talking about? And I think I've talked about it before. Let me just see if I can show that. And Human Rights Watch says the M23 armed groups forcibly transferring civilians.
Right.
Rwanda as occupying force may be responsible for war crime. And some of the things really shocking, right? When you read, you dive deep, and I think you and I we talked about this. It goes into actually saying that the Rwandan government, the M23, with the UNHCR that is in charge of refugees, what the M23 doing essentially, it takes folks, and folks says, "Oh, you're gonna go." They tell folks that, "Hey, we're gonna send you to Rwanda," and they say, "No, I'm Congolese." "No, you're not Congolese." "Yes, I'm Congolese." They show their ID. The M23 confiscate those ID, burn them. They show proof that this is their land, that this is their house. This is the document that show that they are the owner of that land. They take it, they confiscate that, they burn those documents, and that's what that's what we learn in this document, this report. It's really crazy to see that folks, even Congolese citizen, The M23 provided no reason for expanding the population, although some sources thought the decision was related to suspected FDLR members. The interviewees said that although some of the people formerly dispersed from Karega were of Rwandan origin, many were Congolese citizens. Many were Congolese citizens. So why would you displace and send them to Rwanda? Or
Right.
why would you send people to Rwanda when they are not even Rwandan citizens? And that's corroborate with what you just said and what many people have been saying for years, right?
Uh-huh.
And this report talks about 1,500 people sent, and even Rwandan citizen, they don't want to go back. Listen, international law does not allow you or anyone, any nation, to send somebody back if they believe that their life will be in danger. That's why we see what we see with the US trying to get other countries to host those nations. Undocumented folks deported, but if somebody said that I cannot go back to Mexico, I can go back to the Congo, I cannot go back to Nicaragua, to Venezuela, you cannot send those people in the country of origin because they believe that their life is threatened. Rwandan citizens who believe that they cannot go back to Rwanda because of the condition that we discussed
Oh, okay.
earlier,
Okay.
if they say they don't want to go back to Rwanda, you cannot. It's illegal for you to forcibly remove them and send them back to the country of origin. Knowing that fact, and that's exactly what the M23 has been doing, and that's why Human Rights Watch is very, very, you know, intentional by saying M23, but says Rwanda as occupying force. So it's very sad the direction that we are heading toward, and seeing the Congolese leadership right now. And I know you always come and ask me
Yeah.
questions. I'm like, I don't know why they're doing that. Like, I don't know why they would do that. Like
The Congolese leadership.
opening, yeah, the Congolese leadership,
Well,
and even trying
what
to.
leadership? What leadership?
That's
I
a
mean,
good question. That's a good question. And even trying to start a judicial process against former President Kabila, right? Particularly at this instance, I don't think that's smart, right? Like, you are literally just you signing a peace agreement with Rwanda. You're about to sign a peace agreement with the M23. How does it help to arrest a former president who, by the way, his immunity was lifted based on rumors. There were rumors that he was in Goma. He hadn't been to Goma yet. And because based on that rumor, the Congolese government decided to start a process to not impeach, but to remove his immunity as a former president, as a senator, senator à vie, like he's senator for life. He couldn't be prosecuted. He couldn't be brought to any court because of his status of former president. They lifted that immunity so that they could trial, but based on literally speculations and rumors. And after that happened, then the president Kabila decided to come back, and he gave a 45-minute speech. He gave a 45-minute speech in which he said he was going to come back in Congo through Goma. And then, yes, you're right. He's in Congo right now, but he's in a part of the Congo that is right now under Rwandan occupation. So that's why technically they cannot even arrest him.
And they can't arrest him.
I
think Kabila was a loser. There's a way in which M23 won, in that M23 was recognized as a legitimate Congolese entity, even though it's under one command, and DRC had to negotiate with them, as we keep saying. I think that Kabila would have liked for Rwanda to be able to go on and seize power in Kinshasa, and that was not part of the deal. Part of Congo, what Tshisekedi got out of it, and Maurice has said this a number of times. So what Tshisekedi got out of it was staying in power. That otherwise, the Rwandan army might have been capable of going ahead and going all the way to Kinshasa, as they did twice in the past, and overthrowing him. So he gave. I mean, look, he gave away. He more or less gave away the eastern provinces in order to stay in power. That's what this agreement looks like to me.
Yep, that's exactly what's going on. There is a Curtis who's a Congo citizen, and he
Mm.
wants to give his thoughts on the situation. Curtis, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Uh, Hi,
Yeah.
Gaëtan. Hi, and
Hi.
I've been listening. Actually, I was under the rain playing golf and listening to you guys all along. So, but I just wanted
I
to add.
appreciate I appreciate listening to us, man.
Of course, man. Of course. I think that one thing that kind of popped up to me, which
Mm.
and I think that is actually worth looking into, because if we look at the what is this agreement has been drafted, who are the people that actually drafted this agreement? Because I feel that there's a lot of interest, and not just on the side of the Congolese people, because obviously, if you look at the way things are going, it's in
Mhm.
the interest of the U.S., right? There's a lot of American companies that are based in Rwanda that have been making a lot of money with these minerals. You
Yeah.
understand? So all
Hmm.
these deals being done, this is why it justifies why Rwanda was brought on the table, because they are interest there. And all those people are not just going to sit down and wait that you change things in order for them to lose money. So
No.
if you really look at the way things are going, these are not even neither right. I mean, Rwanda, the benefit that they got out of this is that they basically got a clean slate.
Yeah. Yeah. They
But
got a
but
clean slate, and they basically got the Kivus because M23 is a Rwandan force, and the Kivus have been given to M23. I mean, it's it's a grim outcome. I
absolutely. And I talked about Gaëtan about this, and he actually told me this. I didn't really want to believe it, but he told me something it's literally coming into fruition. He said that it doesn't matter for the Americans who is in those regions, as long as they can broker a deal, they don't care, and we
They
see it
don't.
now.
no. Yeah.
They
And
don't.
it
That's
will actually be more beneficial for them, for those territory to be actually outside of the Congolese jurisdiction, because they will be able to 100% control and rule, because it's not going to be a nation, quote unquote. It's going to be a a sub, um, I can't even call it subdivision of the DRC, because it's not going to be totally 100% part of the DRC. So you
the
control more, and you dictate.
the Eastern, and this is on records, and I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna predict, unless there is some sort of awakening from us Congolese, and
Hmm.
also awakening for allies.
Hmm.
And we call ourselves friends with Congo for a reason.
Hmm.
We really want to encourage people who really stand with international law to uh, fight it. And I'm predicting right now in some records that Congo, if we continue to the path that we're going, Congo will become Somaliland, like we've seen. The Congo will become like a South Sudan, like we've seen, because, like I've told you, Curtis, and like in you said it, it really doesn't matter for the West who is leading in the Congo. That is a fact. 14 nations gathered, Basin of Congo. What will happen to that? They give it to King Leopold II so that they will have, France can have ownership of territories like Mali, today's Mali, Senegal. But when it comes to the Congo, it's not a French territory. The British could have territories like at the time South Africa, I don't know, other British colony in the South, Sierra Leone. But when it comes Liberia, but when it comes to the basin of the Congo, there is you don't own it. It's for all of us. Same thing for Germany. Same thing for the Portuguese, and even Spain, and all these countries, including the U.S., who still did not have colonies in the in Africa, and just like Russia, but they still had some sort of interest. And they said that, okay, we all agree, all of us agree. We are at the Berlin Conference. I think this year is the 140th anniversary of the Berlin Conference.
Hmm.
they all agree that the Congo will be a common market, free markets. Everybody can come in. Leopold II was used. After
Mhm,
Leopold II, it was the Kingdom of Belgium, or the Belgian government, if I could say it,
mhm, mhm,
the Belgian Parliament. And after that, from 1908 all the way to 1960, it was given to Congolese people. But they assassinated Lumumba literally 6 months after he was elected. Literally 6 months. But he had less than 6 months to actually exercise as a prime minister because
Oh,
he
mhm,
was on house arrest
and before
most of.
he was assassinated, you know that the Congo was already split into three, right? So
mhm,
you had the
Yes.
Katanga that was literally under and that the Belgium actually instigated and promoted Katanga to become an independent
yeah,
country,
With
right?
Moise Chombe. Yep.
And the
That's a
same
really
thing was
part of the
happening in
history.
Kisangani, right? So
Hmm.
you can literally see that it's something that has been done again and again and again, because it
mhm,
benefit them to have a country that is divided and to be able to control those areas, because when it's divided, the people that you're helping gain control of those areas, they're under your jurisdiction or under your authority, so you control them more and you control the minerals. So it's
Hmm.
basically literally what they're doing today.
And after that, we had the first Congo invasion with Laurent Desire. Well, actually Mobutu, right?
mhm,
Mobutu, 32 years. He was a dictator for 32 years. And when he decided he wanted to nationalize Congolese resources, he was assassinated by the CIA. That's now on public. That's
mhm,
now public records. Like this, literally declassified by the CIA, who had the most. The CIA in the Congo was the most expensive mission of the CIA for the entire world, $81 million. And after Mobutu was assassinated, was after Mobutu was overthrown, right? Lumumba killed by the CIA, overthrown. President Mobutu was overthrown because he was trying to nationalize the resources. They brought Laurent Desire Kabila with the FDL that was backed by Rwanda for the reason that I just mentioned, because Mobutu had decided to nationalize the resources. They assassinate Laurent Desire Kabila in 2001. His son takes over as if we are in the kingdom. And his son's going to lead for 18 years. And when the son decided to also go rogue by trying to break deals with China, they decided that it was time for him to go. And Kabila, in a strategy that maybe no one saw it, handed over the power to Tshisekedi. And now we have Tshisekedi in power. So the US, France, they don't care who's in power. They just want their minerals. When Laurent Desire Kabila started his rebellion, quote unquote, the Senate was saying in a report that is also available in the public that people should not worry about, that the US government should not worry about the stockpile of cobalt because they have enough for decades to come, because
mhm.
they were promised that this conflict was not going to disrupt the supply chains of cobalt. That's what the US Senate wrote back then. I think it was in 1986 or 1989
You're
when there
talking
was
about
already.
the budget office doc, the Congressional Budget Office doc?
I believe so.
Uh,
That's what they wrote. They literally wrote about the stockpile of cobalt not being an issue during the war that was being prepared, because Laurent Desire Kabila was already in the forest in the Congo trying to get weapons, trying to get support. And they're like, no, don't worry about that. We good. We the West, we good. We have enough stockpile, and we also have guarantee and reassurance that they're not gonna disrupt that. So that's why when it doesn't matter who decides to take over the East, the first thing that they do when they took over, and we saw that with Rubaya, they secured those mines and also assure protections of the miners. Look at the reports
you
that the
mean the
UN
mining,
wrote.
you mean the mining companies, right? Mm,
No, 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 the mines, like the lands, when obviously the mining companies as well, because they are the one paying for the extraction. When the Congolese go with the bare hands and trying to get those minerals out,
mhm,
risking their own lives, they bring it to those um, companies that pay them, right? But they say that, hey, we're gonna protect you. And the miners, the Congolese who are actually digging, they're actually also offering. That's what we read from the UN report for I think it was mid June of last year, that when they seize Rubaya, they offered to increase or to double what the miners were making, because they really
Yeah.
want to make sure that that supply chain is not disrupted.
Right.
So that's what we've seen also last year with Joe Biden.
Mhm.
President Biden, there are the M23 in Rwanda advancing, and he comes to Africa, first trip in Africa since what, 2015, I believe.
Mhm.
And there is the Lobito corridor that will be built. The Congo, under this president, signing a deal of 25 years, that lands will not belong to the railroads going in the Congo
Mhm.
from the mines in Katanga all the way out to
Yeah.
to the country. That railroads will not belong to the Congo for at least 25 years. And
Yeah.
not only you have that, but you also have the fact that Rubaya, which is the most richest, I would say, mine in terms of coltan mine in the world, right?
Mhm.
That one belonged at that time because he was under the hand possession of M23 of Rwanda, obviously. The U.S. government, the Biden administration, reached out to the Rwandan government,
Mhm.
offering them
Mhm.
to extend the Lobito corridor all the way to Rubaya, controlled
Mhm.
by Rwanda. Paul
Mhm.
Kagame said no. Look it up. Reuters reported that. So they're like, honestly, this is what the US is saying. We don't care who's president. Y'all gonna sit down and talk. And even Trump was joking about it. What he told folks in Qatar, he told them, do not let these people go until they have an accord. Because at the end of the day, that's American interest, right? So in that midst of
Wait,
conflict,
I missed something. Trump said to the people in Doha, he said what?
do not let them go. They were joking, and I think it was the special envoy that said that they were joking and said, don't let those people go until they sign an accord.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yes, don't let them go until they sign an accord, because obviously war, which is very expensive,
Mhm.
is not benefiting the West, is not benefiting those U.S. nationals, those multinationals, whether they are French, whether they are Americans, and in this show, we are going to break down who is really profiting from the minerals exclusivity, from a conversation with what we got, the report from the Oakland Institute, and we are going to dive into the real victors, the real beneficiary of this accord. But yes, Curtis, and you're right. They don't care who's president. They don't care
There.
what happened to the East. Yeah, and
But one part that is actually really shocking, this happened I think last April, right? There's a
yeah,
territory that was captured by the M23, and surprise, in a very surprising matter, actually, that the U.S. government asked Rwanda to ask the M23 to withdraw from that city. Come to find out, when the you know the secretary that the U.S. have sent, Mr. Boulos, mentioned that those mines had to operate because the closing of those mines had a catastrophic effect on the market in regards to minerals. So just that in itself, if it doesn't wake us up, then we have a serious problem, because this war has been going on for how long? How could a territory that has been captured by a rebel group be influenced that fast to withdraw? And this is happening today.
and I think the company that you're referring to was I believe, and maybe people can correct me, was Alpha Mine. When the is that was that Masisi, I believe,
In
when
Masisi,
yeah,
correct.
exactly, and
So
then
they
they
captured
actually put out a
Masisi,
statement, yes,
right. So they
thanking
captured
Trumps
Masisi,
for that.
and
Yeah,
the US government literally asked Rwanda to ask the M23 to withdraw. So that already it's showing that because of those minerals, because of the effect that it was having on the supply chain on the market,
Yeah.
they asked those rebel groups to withdraw. So it has nothing to do with peace. Because if it was really about peace, they could still use the same influence to ask these people to withdraw from these territories to stop killing people. But the fact that that was not the motivation. The motivation was not peace. The motivation was not saving human lives or humanitarian cause. It was actually because a mine was closed,
Yeah.
and the effect of that supply chain being being disrupted had a serious implication on the market.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you should have Curtis on your on your next podcast.
Yeah,
If you have
trust me, I've tried, but it's
okay,
you
no.
know,
Oh, he doesn't want to do that.
some
Okay.
folks, like Curtis, I appreciate they just want to be anonymous, and I respect that, right?
Oh, I
And
see.
but
Okay.
Curtis is very knowledgeable and
Mhm.
somebody that I respect. But yeah, thanks, Curtis, and I really appreciate you um stopping by.
Of course, my
Sorry,
pleasure, bro.
and I said it was Masisi, was actually Wali Kali. So it was
Right.
Wali
Well,
Kali. Yes,
yeah, yeah.
yes. But yeah,
Um,
I think um yes, where Wali Kali, where Alpha Mine owns the BZ mining concession. Yeah. So I guess we've been here for almost 3 hours, 2 hours and 45
it's,
minutes now. I
it's,
think
I
uh,
had to
I
give
think we're gonna wrap up. As
okay.
interesting as the issue of the Congo is. I don't want to drag it too long than it
Yeah.
already is. So I guess I mean I think I exhausted all the questions, but I have this one particularly for you, Anne.
Okay.
Um, if you could change one thing about how Congo is being reported right now or discussed in Western media, what would it be?
Not sure if I can think of. I'm not sure if I can think of one thing. There might be several, but
But what? Okay, let me reframe. Let me rephrase it. What are you doing that you think the Western media or mainstream media is not doing or could be doing more of?
well, I think first of all, and this started with Victoire. I've challenged the narrative. Charles Onana called it one of the greatest lies of the 20th century. The narrative that um, that the Rwandan genocide was all committed by Hutu perpetrators against Tutsi victims, because that is the narrative that was institutionalized at the International Criminal Tribunal in Rwanda. That if you study everything, what happened had actually been planned before Anthony Lake came out and announced it on July 29th, several weeks after the end of the war and genocide, and before any kind of scientific study of what had happened could have been done. That's the narrative that has been used to justify this for 30 years. And that narrative is repeated in the peace agreement with this garbage about Rwanda's defensive measures and neutralizing the FDLR. That's the extension of the institutionalized narrative that Tutsis were victims, Hutus were perpetrators. It's a vastly oversimplified Manichean narrative. That I would change. I mean, if you acknowledge that, then the fundamental premises and the structure of the peace agreement are no longer valid. And I would also acknowledge, let's see, the legitimation of the occupation that this peace deal represents, and then what I was the legitimacy is it. I'm getting tired. The legitimation of the occupation, the reward for the 30 years, or 30 years of aggression, and I think that the corporate hand, the foreign governmental and corporate involvement in this. And I had wanted to say before we wrap that I think there's an advance in the corporate involvement, because for many years the artisanal mining and smuggling was getting the flow of minerals out, but now the tech barons want to institute industrialized mining. So they want to establish peace so that they can move in with the industrial mines. And this is a new stage in the exploitation. So that's the challenging the narrative basis of the war and occupation, which is this mistelling, this simplification of the Rwandan genocide. Acknowledging that the peace agreement is really a legitimation of the 30 years of war and occupation. That it's that M23 is not being asked to withdraw. It said M23 is being left with control of the Kivus, control of Goma and Bukavu, the capitals of North and South Kivu province, and then the role of the corporations behind this is a fact. Okay, this is too big an answer. Okay, the fact that all of these sanctions and UN resolutions 2773 have just been shoved aside to make way for the legitimation of the occupation and the next stage of the corporate exploitation.
Yeah, and you said it all. And yeah, and Curtis, before we wrap up, I guess for you, as a Congolese citizen, what one, right? And you feel free to say whatever you want. What do you think of the peace deal? Last one, and two, how would you want people? Today we have Ann Garrison, who's a journalist, on the show to talk about and give her perspective. How would you want journalists, students, activists to support the Congo? Curtis?
Well, thank you for an amazing show today. Actually, thank you so much, and also I know, I mean, almost 3 hours of your time.
I'm pretty tired.
You know what I mean. So really,
This is
I'm
it.
sorry.
No,
right.
it's okay.
In case Judy says that, like I promise, we will not go 3 hours.
No, I applaud you. I applaud you, and thank you
Okay.
for your time. Honestly,
Okay.
I think that what are you doing is commendable, right? Because this region has been a region that's really been left to fend itself. To be honest with you,
Absolutely.
obviously there's a huge influence when I say about corporations, right? Because it's from a person that lives in America and working in been working in the corporate world, understanding how people negotiate and a capitalist system, right?
Mhm.
I mean, the logic here, what I see what's happening. I mean, obviously, all those mineral companies in Rwanda. I'll give you a perfect example. The numbers are online. How much those mines that so quote unquote produce minerals in Rwanda, like the biggest mine that they have, and the production that those mines have, and these numbers are you can verify. It's worth about 30 million a year. That's their revenue. But if you look how much Rwanda has produced as an export on crucial critical mineral, the last year I think it was about $1 billion. There's a huge difference from 30
and
million of your
Yeah.
proven production to $1 billion.
and
Now,
not to interrupt, but $1 billion, that was the International Monetary Fund. They said that Rwanda is on track to export $1 billion worth of gold, when a couple years ago, last year, in the last years, they've actually exported only 300 millions. So
Right.
that's just to put people in perspective what you're saying.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
in perspective and hindsight, that means that there's people making money because the companies that are actually refining those products for export are American companies. Those mines that we're talking about in Rwanda are owned by British American companies. Like if you look at the corporate entity who's on the board and so forth. Now, look at the logic here is what? If they're making $1 billion, because obviously it's about making money, it's capital system corporation, they want to make profit.
Mhm.
Imagine if there is structure in the DRC and everything becomes legitimate. They're not going to be getting those minerals at the price that they're getting it at, because right now it's artisanal mining, right? So
Right.
if they were getting it at 50, like I look at the documentary, how much they're selling a kilo of coltan is about $50. That's madness.
Mhm.
So guess what? The prices will go up. And for people that are thriving to make profit, nobody want to lose. And in order for them to maintain or even increase their revenue, they're going to disrupt. And it's as simple as that. And that's what I say, follow the money. It's always been about money. It's always been about mineral. This is a lucrative business. It's a lucrative industry.
Mhm.
And especially right now, understanding that Congo is on his knees. There's no real structure on the other side. Then they're not gonna hold your hand. This is the
Mhm.
reality of what a capitalist system is. You sleep, they will step on you. It's as simple as that. So
Yes.
to your question, this is what we're looking at today, right? And for journalists to actually be able to have the courage to speak the truth, it's all that we're asking for. Speak your truth. I think that there's a lot of people that are being bought. There's a lot of narratives out there that actually are not true. And to your point, and I'm gonna end with this. This is what they're selling internationally. I made peace in Congo between Rwanda and. But when you look into the details, you understand that one, there's no real peace. Two, there's no real justice for all these victims. Over 10 million people. You're saying that there's 30 million people that have died in the last 30 years, but where's the justice, right? So it's very it's a paradox. It's very it doesn't even add up. So yeah, my thing is that I really applaud you, and I think that a lot of more journalists should have the courage to speak the truth. You know what I mean? And the Congolese people really, they need it, because there's a lot of people that don't even have the courage to speak to for themselves. They don't even understand what are their rights. Some people that are born in the jungle, some young kids that have been born in very detrimental situation, that can't that they do not even understand that this is not right. But you
Mhm.
know
Yeah.
I hope that it will change, and especially for people that are speaking out like yourself, like Gaetan, that are very resilient about this. And it doesn't matter who's there, like he will speak his truth.
Yeah, thank you so much, Curtis. And
Yeah.
just to kind of like paraphrase what you just said, because there was I'm not gonna mention her name, but she's a U.S. politician, congresswoman, and she said that nobody makes $1 billion. People take billion of dollars. For you to be able to profit and have that much money, it means that somebody didn't get paid. Some like down the line, like it's really crazy because
Yeah.
our organization we talk with the miners, like they literally have a whole, I would say, structure. They're organized, right? And they will tell you, there were actually filmed that we have been with Pedna, one of our partners, doing around the miners, and they speak about what they want. They speak about their conditions. They speak about their aspirations. And when you look at how much you get paid to literally go under, and then dig holes and go in and dig and come out with minerals, it's just inhumane. And that's the type of work that Friends of the Congo and many other organizations, and Salute Public Citizen also, for putting forward documents that to talk about the abuse of this so-called green energy transition, this capitalist demands for national for Congolese resources at the expense, unfortunately, of the Congolese population. So, Curtis, thank you so much for joining, and I'm gonna give you uh, time if you want to say anything before I end the live. So, yeah,
The last thing
Curtis,
I'm going to
thank
say
you.
is, okay, free Victoire Ingabire, Ingabire, various pronunciations. I don't think it's realistic to think that we can get her out of Rwanda. She isn't allowed to leave. She hasn't been allowed to leave Rwanda since she was released in 2018. It's 2025. She's facing going back to prison. I think we should try to keep her alive. There's a danger that she'll just die in prison. Will be told she was sick, that she committed suicide, whatever, like Casito Mexico was, as we were with Casito Mexico. We need to try to keep her alive and keep her out of prison so she can keep speaking. She's one of the only rational voices speaking the truth here, both about Rwanda and about Congo. And she's had enormous, boundless courage to go back and speak this truth and say, okay, they can assassinate me, they can re-imprison me. Okay, if that's going to happen, that's what's going to happen. Boundless courage to speak the truth. We need to keep her out of prison so that she can keep doing that.
Yes, and thank you so much. There's a question for you, actually, Anne. Moon, child of Saturn on Instagram, ask, how can we continue to follow your work? And there was a genuine question for you. How can people support and follow your work?
Oh, Black Agenda Report. And I write for Black Agenda Report and for the Gray Zone. I wrote for Black Agenda Report almost every week, although sometimes it's so hard for me to keep up with. I feel like I can't finish these pieces I've been working on for the Gray Zone if I write for Black Agenda Report every week. But I am working for pieces on the Gray Zone, on pieces for the Gray Zone about both the Horn of Africa and about the Congo peace deal, everything that Gaëtan and I have been talking about today on the Congo peace deal. So I've written several pieces about Rwanda, Congo for the Gray Zone. I've written many for Black Agenda Report. And if you go there, I have authors pages on both sites. And if you go and you find me as an author on those sites, you can click on my name and find everything I've written for both publications.
Awesome. So you heard Anne. Follow her. She's on X. Are you on Instagram or Facebook?
I don't use
X?
Instagram. I don't use
Okay.
Instagram, but I use Facebook. And I've actually found that I seem to have somewhat larger audience for Rwanda Congo issues on Facebook than I do on X. On X, I have more of a Horn of Africa audience.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So follow Anne. She's on Facebook. She's on X. Follow her and also follow Black Agenda Reports. She has written and continued to write a lot about the Horn of Africa, about the Congo. Follow the Gray Zone as well. And I see Compassion Mexico stands with Congo. Amen, brother, comrades, and people all the way to Mexico following us. And thank you, y'all. I think, wow, wow.
Let's follow Gaëtan. Follow Gaëtan and
Nah.
follow
Follow Friends of the Congo. Follow Friends of the Congo.
Congo friends. No, Gaëtan, what you do is important. I mean, I would also say follow at Babissima. If you speak French, follow Charles Onana.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. I've seen we have over 800 people following or watching this live.
Wow.
600 just on Friends of the Congo. So thank you all for being tuned in and continue to support the Congo, continue to support our work. Visit freecongo.org to see how you can plug in and how you can actually support. Multiple ways for you to do that. Donate your time, donate your money. We do need help, and Congo Week is coming. Third week of October every year. We have been doing that for what, like almost 10 years now or more. So y'all continue to be engaged, continue to follow us, continue to reach to share and comment Ann Garrison's work, Friends of the Congo, the Gray Zone, Black Agenda Reports. And until then, I will see you next Friday. And thank you so much for the time.
Peace out.
for the commitment. So yeah, thanks and peace
Okay.
out. Peace, you guys. See you next week.